The world returned in fragments. First came the sensation of weight, a crushing pressure on every brittle surface. Then came the sound, a low, grinding rumble like stones being crushed beneath a millstone. Finally, light pierced the darkness, a sickly greenish glow that filtered through gaps in a mountain of bone. Leo lay buried in a pile of skeletal remains, his own frame indistinguishable from the others. White ribs, femurs, and skulls formed a chaotic tomb around him. He tried to move, but his limbs responded sluggishly, as though controlled by puppet strings from a great distance. There was no memory of how he got here, only a vague sense of wrongness, a flicker of awareness that didn't belong in this place of death. A sharp command cut through the air, spoken in a language of guttural syllables that somehow translated in his mind. Rise. The pile shifted. Bones clattered and rolled as dozens of skeletons began extracting themselves, moving with jerky, mechanical motions. Leo found himself pulled along by an unseen force, his feet stumbling over femurs and shattered spines. He emerged into a landscape of desolation. They stood in what had once been a forest. Now the trees were blackened skeletons themselves, their branches reaching like accusing fingers toward a sky the color of bruised flesh. The ground was churned mud mixed with ash and bone fragments. Ahead, perhaps a mile distant, rose stone walls, a human outpost with watchtowers silhouetted against the gloom. Leo looked down at his hands. Bony fingers, yellowed with age, flexed when he willed them to. He was a skeleton. The realization should have brought panic, but the emotion felt distant, muffled beneath layers of something else, a profound emptiness where feelings should have been. Around him, perhaps 200 other skeletons shambled into formation. They wore tattered remnants of armor, rusted breastplates, cracked helms, leather straps that hung loose on bone. None spoke. None looked at one another. Their eye sockets were dark hollows, and within them glimmered only the faintest pinpricks of that same sickly green light that illuminated the battlefield. At the rear of the formation stood their master. Malachar wore robes of midnight black embroidered with silver threads that formed patterns of binding and domination. His face was pale, almost translucent, with veins visible beneath the skin like blue rivers on a map of death. His eyes held no warmth, only calculation. He carried a staff of twisted dark wood topped with a crystal that pulsed with the same green energy that animated his army. Forward, Malachar commanded, his voice carrying without effort. The living cower behind their walls. Break them. Bring me their souls. The skeletons began marching. Their movement was unerringly synchronized, hundreds of bony feet striking the ground in a steady rhythm that sounded like a drumbeat for the dead. Leo found himself marching with them, his consciousness floating somewhere between awareness and oblivion. He tried to remember who he was before this, but the memories slipped away like smoke through skeletal fingers. They crossed the blasted ground. The air smelled of ozone and decay. As they drew closer to the outpost, details emerged, archers on the walls, their bows drawn, soldiers in chainmail holding spears, a banner bearing a golden lion on a field of blue snapping in the foul wind. When they were 300 yards out, the first arrows fell. Shafts of wood and steel whistled through the air. They struck skeletons with wet thunks, punching through ribs, shattering skulls, pinning limbs to torsos. The undead didn't scream. They simply fell, their green light extinguishing as they collapsed into piles of disconnected bones. The march continued, stepping over the fallen without pause. Leo watched an arrow streak toward him. Instinct, or perhaps memory, made him twist aside. The shaft grazed his ribcage, chipping bone but missing the spinal column that housed the glowing energy. He kept moving. The flicker of awareness grew stronger. He was thinking. He was dodging. The other skeletons didn't dodge. They reached the walls. Ladders of bone materialized from the ground, rising like grotesque plants growing at unnatural speed. Skeletons began climbing, their bony fingers finding purchase on the rough stone. From above, boiling oil poured down. It sizzled as it struck bone, melting through skeletal frames, sending skeletons tumbling back to shatter on the ground below. Leo climbed. He didn't know why. The command still pulled at him, but now there was something else, a desire to survive. To not end up as another pile of discarded bones. He reached the top of the wall. A human soldier stood before him, face contorted in fear and rage. The man wore plate armor polished to a dull shine, a sword in his hands that gleamed with holy symbols. A knight. Abomination, the knight roared, and brought his sword down in a sweeping arc. Leo tried to block with his arms. The sword sheared through both radius and ulna, sending bone fragments flying. He stumbled back, his remaining hand clutching at the stump. There was no pain, only a strange detachment as he watched his own bones scatter across the stone. The knight advanced, his movements precise, trained. Around them, other skeletons fell to similar blows. They were fragile, brittle, expendable. Something stirred in Leo's consciousness. A system he didn't understand activated without his conscious command. A translucent interface appeared before his vision, written in glowing runes that somehow translated. Soulforge System initiated. Sanity, 100%. Available souls in proximity, 1, dying. Absorb. Y/N. The knight raised his sword for a killing blow aimed at Leo's skull. In that moment, Leo saw past the armor. Saw the man's face, not just a soldier, but a father. Memories that weren't his own flashed, a woman with kind eyes, 2 children laughing in a sunlit field, a promise to return home after this campaign. Then an arrow from somewhere on the wall struck the knight in the gap between breastplate and helmet. It punched through his throat. Blood sprayed in a crimson arc. The knight's eyes went wide with surprise, then pain, then the acceptance of death. He fell to his knees, sword clattering from his grasp. His soul began to separate from his body, a shimmering silver light that rose like mist from the dying flesh. The system prompted again, absorb. Y/N. Leo didn't choose. The choice was made for him by some deeper instinct, some hunger he hadn't known he possessed. The silver light streamed toward him, entering through his empty eye sockets, filling the hollow spaces of his ribcage. Agony. Not physical pain, but something worse, a violation of self. The knight's memories flooded into him, the warmth of his wife's embrace, the sound of his children's laughter, the taste of fresh bread from the village oven, the terror of watching plague take his parents, the guilt of leaving for war, the prayer whispered every night for forgiveness. And beneath it all, the knight's final skill, years of training, countless hours in the practice yard, the muscle memory of parries and thrusts, the strategy of positioning, the calm focus of a warrior facing death. Soul absorbed. Skill acquired, knight's resolve. Sanity drain, 10%. Current sanity, 90%. The world snapped into sharp focus. Leo wasn't just aware, he was sentient. He understood where he was, what had just happened. He looked at his bony hands, and now they glowed with a faint silver light where before there had been only green. The stump of his arm began to regenerate, new bone growing from the break at visible speed. The knight's body collapsed fully, empty. Another soldier charged at Leo, this one younger, less armored, wielding a spear. The attack came in a straightforward thrust aimed at his chest. Before, Leo would have taken the blow. Now, knight's resolve, activated. His body moved without conscious thought. He sidestepped the thrust, his remaining hand coming up to deflect the spear shaft, his foot hooking behind the soldier's ankle. The man stumbled, off balance. Leo drove his bony fingers into the gap between helmet and collar, feeling them punch through flesh. The soldier gasped, choked, fell. Leo looked at his hand, dripping with blood that wasn't his. The warmth of it was alien on his dead bones. He turned, scanning the battle. Skeletons were being cut down systematically. Malachar stood at a distance, observing, his staff glowing as he directed the assault. The necromancer's gaze swept across the wall, calculating losses, assessing progress. Then those cold eyes locked onto Leo. They narrowed. Malachar tilted his head, studying him. Leo felt the scrutiny like a physical pressure. The other skeletons moved with mindless obedience. Leo had just executed a combat maneuver. He had dodged. He had killed with precision rather than mindless hacking. An anomaly. Malachar raised his staff. The crystal at its tip brightened, casting a beam of green light that swept across the battlefield until it settled on Leo. The light didn't harm him, but it felt invasive, like being examined under a magnifying glass. On the wall, Leo looked down at his hands again. The silver glow from the absorbed soul pulsed in time with something that might have been a heartbeat if he still had a heart. He could think. He could remember, both his own fragmented memories and the knight's stolen ones. He could feel the weight of what he'd just done, the violation of consuming another's essence. And he could feel the emptiness where 10% of his sanity had been. A coldness in his consciousness. A distance from the emotions that should have accompanied this horror. Malachar began walking toward the wall, his expression unreadable but his attention unwavering. The battle continued around them, but in that moment, Leo knew with absolute certainty, the Necromancer had seen. Had recognized that one of his mindless grunts was no longer mindless. And in the silver glow of stolen life, Leo realized the terrible truth of his existence. He could think. He could survive. But every step toward sentience would cost him pieces of himself. The soul's memories of a murdered family, the knight's family, slaughtered by undead raiders a year prior, echoed in his mind, a ghostly condemnation. He was alive. And he was damned. The battlefield's carnage faded into the shuffling march of bone on mud. Leo moved with the tide of skeletons, his newly acquired arm, reclaimed from the pile of fallen undead, clattering against his ribcage with each step. The knight's memories still echoed in the hollows of his skull, Sir Gareth's final moments, the warmth of a family he'd never known, the cold steel that had ended it all. These ghosts of a life not his own whispered through the cracks in his awareness, a haunting chorus that both anchored him and threatened to drown what little remained of Leo himself. Around him, the other skeletons marched in perfect, mindless unison. No hesitation, no fear, no curiosity about the glowing runes that now traced faint lines across Leo's bones, a subtle luminescence that pulsed with the rhythm of his stolen soul. He tried to still the light, to bury it beneath the mundane clatter of his frame, but it persisted like a beacon in the twilight gloom. They returned to the Necromancer's camp as the sun bled out behind jagged mountains. The camp was a sprawl of dark tents and raised earthworks, surrounded by a palisade of sharpened stakes adorned with the skulls of previous failures. At its center stood a command tent of blackened leather, from which Malachar emerged. The Necromancer was a tall, gaunt figure wrapped in robes the color of dried blood. His face was hidden beneath a deep hood, but 2 pinpricks of violet light burned where eyes should be. He moved with an unnatural grace, his staff, topped with a human skull that glowed with captive souls, tapping softly against the ground as he inspected his returning forces. Leo kept his head down, mimicking the vacant stare of the skeletons around him. But as Malachar passed, those violet eyes lingered. The Necromancer stopped, the air growing colder around him. He raised a bony hand, and Leo felt an invisible force lift him from the ranks, suspending him in mid-air as the other skeletons continued their march into designated holding pits. Defective, Malachar's voice rasped, like stones grinding together. Your bones glow with stolen essence. A flaw in the forging. The Necromancer circled him, staff raised. Leo could feel the scrutiny like physical pressure against his frame. Memories of Sir Gareth's training surfaced unbidden, assessments of weakness, evaluations of threat. But he forced them down, maintaining the empty posture of a mindless servant. No matter, Malachar continued. The forge consumes flawed materials to strengthen the whole. He gestured, and 2 larger skeletons, their bones reinforced with iron bands and dark magic, shambled forward. These were not grunts like Leo, but something more, skeleton enforcers, their eye sockets burning with the same violet light as their masters. One carried a massive hammer that seemed to drink the light around it, the other held chains that rattled with the whispers of bound spirits. Destroy it, Malachar commanded. Return its essence to the soul well. The enforcer with the hammer raised its weapon. Leo's instincts screamed, not the knight's training this time, but something deeper, more primal. The will to survive that had carried him through death and rebirth. As the hammer descended, he didn't think. He acted. Knight's resolve flared to life in his consciousness. Time seemed to slow. The hammer's arc became a predictable trajectory. Leo twisted his skeletal body with unnatural grace, the skill granting him not just technique but momentary clarity. He didn't dodge backward into the waiting chains of the second enforcer. Instead, he lunged sideways, toward a nearby skeleton soldier that had been damaged in the battle, its leg shattered, its skull cracked open to reveal the fading ember of its animating magic. As Leo's bony fingers closed around the dying skeleton's skull, the Soulforge system activated without conscious command. A window appeared in his vision, glowing with eldritch script. Soul absorption available. Source, skeleton soldier, degraded. Potential skill, bone reinforcement. Sanity cost, 5%. There was no time for hesitation. Leo willed the absorption. The dying skeleton's essence, a pale, cold thing compared to Sir Gareth's vibrant soul, flowed into him. It tasted of dust and emptiness, of endless marching and blind obedience. There were no memories here, no fragments of a life lived. Only the hollow echo of service. His sanity bar flickered in his vision, dropping from 90% to 85%. The change was subtle but profound, a cooling of something he hadn't realized was warm, a distancing from the ghost of humanity that Sir Gareth's soul had briefly restored. But the power came with it. Bone reinforcement surged through his frame. His bones darkened from bleached white to the color of aged ivory, then to something harder, the gray of storm-worn stone. Cracks sealed themselves. Weak points fortified. When the enforcer's hammer struck his ribcage a moment later, instead of shattering, they rang with a sound like struck granite. The impact still sent him skidding backward through the mud, but he remained intact. More importantly, he remained convincingly mindless. As he lay there, Leo forced himself to go limp, to let his skull loll at an unnatural angle, to extinguish any hint of the intelligence that had just saved him. Malachar approached, his violet eyes studying the scene. Interesting, he murmured. The flawed one consumed a weaker to withstand a stronger. A crude survival instinct, perhaps. He knelt, bony fingers tracing the newly reinforced bones. Or something more. The soul well hungers for the coming harvest. Perhaps this one will serve as a useful tool before being consumed. With a wave of his hand, Malachar dismissed the enforcers. Return it to the ranks. Let us see what this anomaly becomes. Leo was dragged to his feet and shoved toward the holding pits. As he walked, he focused on the emptiness the skeleton soldier's soul had left within him. It was easier, in a way. Less painful than Sir Gareth's memories. Colder. More fitting for what he was becoming. Night fell over the camp. The skeletons stood motionless in their pits, awaiting the next command. Leo stood among them, but his awareness remained, a flickering candle in a cavern of darkness. He watched as Malachar moved through the camp, consulting with other necromancers in hushed tones. They gathered around a massive stone basin filled with black liquid that reflected no light, the soul well. From his position, Leo could just make out their words on the cold night air. The fortress at Dawn's Edge holds 500 souls, one necromancer was saying, his voice eager. Their defenses are weakened from the last assault. Malachar nodded slowly. The harvest must be substantial. The Lich King's awakening requires a river of essence, not a trickle. Prepare the bone constructs. We march at moonset. The flawed one, another asked, gesturing toward Leo's pit. Let it march with the vanguard, Malachar decided. If it survives, we study it. If it falls, its essence joins the harvest. As they spoke, something stirred within Leo. Not fear. Not anger. Something deeper and more primal. A hunger. It started as a faint ache in his hollow chest, then grew into a gnawing need. He looked at the necromancers, at their souls glowing like lanterns in his enhanced vision. He looked at the other skeletons, each containing a tiny spark of animating magic. He looked at the soul well, brimming with stolen life. And he wanted. The Soulforge system flickered in his vision, not as a notification but as a presence, a whispering promise of power. His sanity bar, still visible at the edge of his awareness, pulsed faintly. 85%. But as the hunger grew, he saw it flicker. Just for a moment, the number blurred. 84%. Then back to 85%. But the flicker had been real. The cost was already being extracted, not just from soul absorption, but from the desire itself. From the monstrous need growing in what passed for his heart. Around him, the other skeletons stood perfectly still, empty vessels awaiting command. Leo stood among them, looking just as mindless. But within his reinforced skull, plans began to form. Calculations. Opportunities. The night's training combined with the skeleton's cold logic, all fueled by this new, terrible hunger. Malachar turned toward the pits, his violet eyes sweeping over his forces. For a moment, they seemed to linger on Leo. The necromancer smiled, a crack in leathery flesh that revealed too many teeth. Feed well, my children, he whispered to the night. Tomorrow, we feast. And in the darkness, Leo's own hunger answered. The necromancer's camp stirred with unnatural purpose as dawn's pale light filtered through the skeletal trees. Leo stood among the ranks of undead, his bones still humming with the cold reinforcement gained from the skeleton soldier's soul. The memory of that absorption lingered, a hollow, empty sensation that made his own consciousness feel like a flickering candle in a vast, dark cavern. Malachar moved through the ranks, his black robes whispering against the frost-covered ground. The necromancer's eyes, pools of violet energy, scanned his creations with clinical detachment. When those eyes fell upon Leo, they paused, narrowed. Leo forced himself to remain perfectly still, the mimicry of mindlessness perfected through nights of practice. You three, Malachar's voice rasped, pointing a bony finger at Leo and two other skeletons. Scavenge the western woods. Bring back any intact weapons or armor. The living left more than bodies on that field. The command held no room for refusal. Leo fell into step with the other skeletons, their movements jerky and mechanical. As they left the camp's perimeter, the forest swallowed them in shadows and silence. The other two skeletons moved with the empty precision of puppets, their eye sockets dark and vacant. Leo kept pace, his own awareness a secret burden. The western woods were a graveyard of the recent battle. Shattered shields lay against tree roots, broken swords half buried in leaf litter, and here and there, the remains of soldiers picked clean by scavengers. The air smelled of damp earth and lingering death. Leo's companions began their task, gathering rusted metal with clumsy hands. That's when he saw her. Half hidden beneath a fallen oak, an elf lay with an arrow through her throat. Her armor was leather and living wood, now stained dark with dried blood. Silver hair fanned around a face frozen in a snarl of bitter defiance. Even in death, her beauty was sharp and dangerous. But it was the shimmer around her that caught Leo's attention, a faint, greenish glow that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Her soul. The Soulforge system activated without his conscious command. Text scrolled across his vision, cold and clinical. Soul detected, Elven Ranger. Potential skill acquisition, Elven Agility. Sanity cost, 15%. Current sanity, 85%. Warning, sanity below 70% may trigger permanent personality shifts. Leo froze, his bony fingers inches from the elf's still form. 15%. Nearly twice what the knight's soul had cost. He remembered the flood of Sir Gareth's memories, the warmth of a family hearth, the agony of betrayal, the cold finality of steel through flesh. That absorption had left him reeling, his own identity momentarily drowned in another's life. What would an elf's memories do to him? What ancient grudges, what forest-born spite would seep into his crumbling humanity? He hesitated, the hunger for power warring with the fear of what he might become. His sanity bar glowed ominously in his peripheral vision, a reminder that every soul consumed carved away another piece of whatever remained of Leo the man. The decision was torn from him by the sound of snapping twigs and muttered curses. Over here. I found more of those bone walkers, a human voice shouted. Leo turned just as 5 soldiers emerged from the trees. They wore the colors of Dawn's Edge, the same fortress Malachar planned to assault. Their leader, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, leveled a crossbow. Scavengers from the Necromancer's filth. Kill them. Bolts flew. One of Leo's companion skeletons took a shot through the skull, its bones collapsing into a lifeless heap. The other stumbled forward, only to be cut down by a swordsman's practice stroke. Leo moved on instinct, knight's resolve, activating. Sir Gareth's combat knowledge flowed through him, the proper stance to minimize target profile, the way to read an opponent's weight shift. He dodged the first crossbow bolt, but a second grazed his ribcage, sending chips of bone flying. This one's different, the scarred soldier barked. It's dodging. They spread out, surrounding him. 2 swordsmen advanced from the front while an archer knocked another arrow. The scarred leader reloaded his crossbow with practiced efficiency. The 5th soldier, younger with fear-wide eyes, held a spear with trembling hands. Leo calculated his chances with cold clarity. Bone reinforcement made him durable, but not invincible. Knight's resolve gave him skill, but not speed. Against 5 trained soldiers, he was outmatched. His gaze flicked back to the dead elf. Her soul still shimmered, a tempting beacon. The archer loosed his arrow. Leo twisted, but not fast enough. The shaft buried itself in his left shoulder joint, pinning bone to bone. He felt no pain, only the mechanical awareness of impaired mobility. Now, the scarred leader commanded. The swordsman charged. In that moment, Leo made his choice. He lunged for the elf's body, his free hand plunging into the shimmering green light where her heart would have been. The world dissolved. Soul absorbed, Elven Ranger. Skill acquired, Elven Agility. Sanity drain, 15%. Current sanity, 70%. A torrent of memories flooded his consciousness, but these were nothing like Sir Gareth's. Where the knight's memories had been human, warm with love, hot with rage, these were ancient and cold. Centuries of forest patrols. The whisper of leaves in languages only elves could hear. The bitter taste of betrayal when human loggers burned the sacred groves. The final moment, an arrow from a Dawn's Edge watchtower, fired by a soldier who laughed as she fell. Her name had been Lyra. She had loved the dawn mist on spiderwebs. She had hated humans with a purity that bordered on religious fervor. And now her hatred was his. Leo screamed without lungs, a silent vibration that shook his bones. Green energy crackled along his skeletal frame. When the swordsman reached him, he was already moving. Elven agility transformed him. Where before he had moved with the clattering stiffness of the undead, now he flowed like water through stone. He ducked under the first sword swing, his body bending at impossible angles. The second blade passed through empty air where his ribs had been a heartbeat before. The soldiers stared, their confidence crumbling into superstitious fear. What in the hells? Leo didn't let them finish. He tore the arrow from his shoulder, the reinforced bone barely chipped. With Lyra's memories guiding him, he moved. Not with Sir Gareth's disciplined swordsmanship, but with the wild, unpredictable grace of a forest predator. He snatched a fallen branch and in 3 movements had disarmed the first swordsman, broken the second's wrist, and positioned himself between 2 trees. The archer fired again. Leo didn't dodge, he caught the arrow mid-flight, his movements a green-tinged blur. He snapped the shaft and charged. The scarred leader fired his crossbow. At this range, it should have been impossible to miss. But Leo wasn't where the bolt aimed. He'd already shifted left, then right, his footwork a dance Lyra had perfected over 200 years of evading human hunters. The bolt thudded into a tree. Retreat, the leader shouted, his voice cracking. It's some new abomination. They fled, the young spearman dropping his weapon in his panic. Leo could have pursued. With elven agility, he could have run them down one by one, feeling their bones break under his reinforced fists. The hunger urged him to do it, to taste more souls, to grow stronger. But Lyra's memories fought within him. Her hatred of humans screamed for their deaths. Yet beneath that, like a fading echo, something of Leo remembered what it was to be afraid, to run from monsters in the dark. He let them go. When the last sounds of their flight faded, Leo stood alone in the clearing. His body thrummed with new power. He took a step and covered 10 feet without effort. He leaped and caught a branch 20 feet up, swinging with effortless grace. The elven agility was more than speed, it was a complete recalibration of movement, a predatory efficiency that made his previous existence feel like dragging stones through mud. But the cost. He looked at his hands. The bones, once pale white, now showed faint traceries of dark energy, thin veins of shadow that pulsed in time with his thoughts. When he focused, he could feel Lyra's presence like a second consciousness, whispering of ancient forests and human treachery. Sir Gareth's memories remained too, but fainter, drowned under the elf's stronger, more recent imprint. His sanity bar glowed a warning orange at 70%. The drop from 85% felt different, not just a number decreasing, but a tangible thinning of his self. Colors seemed less vivid. The memory of his own past life, the life before becoming a skeleton, felt like a story someone else had told him once, long ago. He needed shelter. The soldiers might return with reinforcements. Using his new agility, Leo moved through the forest like a ghost. He found a cave half hidden by a waterfall, the entrance narrow and dark. Inside, the air was damp and cold. He settled against the far wall, the sounds of dripping water the only company. For a long time, he simply existed. Then, driven by some morbid curiosity, he examined his evolving form. His bones were indeed changing. The bone reinforcement had thickened them, made them harder. But now, with elven agility, and the cumulative soul absorptions, dark energy swirled just beneath the surface. When he flexed his fingers, faint purple-green light leaked from the joints. He found a still pool in one corner of the cave. The water was black and mirror-smooth. Leo leaned over it, and for the first time since his reincarnation, he saw his reflection clearly. The face that stared back was a skull, yes, but not the empty, vacant thing he'd been at the start. The bone had taken on a polished, almost obsidian sheen. And in the dark sockets where eyes should have been, 2 pinpricks of light glowed. Not the mindless red of Malakar's skeletons, but a flickering, intelligent blue-green, the color of deep forest shadows and forgotten graves. As he watched, the whispers began. Not from outside. From within. More, Sir Gareth's memory echo urged, his voice faint but insistent. Asterisk, you need strength to survive. To be free, asterisk. Kill them all, Lyra's presence hissed, stronger, venomous. Asterisk, the humans deserve only ash and silence. Consume their souls. Let their fear be your feast, asterisk. Leo clutched his skull, but the voices weren't in his ears, they were in the very fabric of his being. The absorbed souls weren't just memories, they were fragments of consciousness, trapped within him, influencing him. With each absorption, he gained power but invited new passengers into the crumbling house of his sanity. Just one more, the voices whispered in unison, a terrible harmony. Asterisk, the next soul will give you what you need. The hunger is purpose. The emptiness is power, asterisk. In the pool's reflection, the glowing eyes seemed to brighten. The skeletal face appeared to smile, though no muscles moved. Leo realized with dawning horror that he was smiling too, or whatever passed for a smile when one had no lips, no flesh, only bone and dark energy and the whispers of the dead. Outside, dusk fell. Somewhere in the forest, an animal cried out, then was silenced. Leo remained in the cave, listening to the voices, watching his reflection, wondering how much of him was still Leo, and how much was becoming something else entirely. The undead camp stank of rot and damp earth. Leo stood motionless in a ragged line of skeletons, his bones still faintly glowing with the blue-green energy from Lyra's soul. The whispers had grown louder overnight, Sir Gareth's mournful memories of a family he'd failed to protect, Lyra's bitter hatred of humans who'd burned her sacred grove. They murmured in the hollow spaces of his skull, a chorus of stolen lives that threatened to drown out what remained of his own thoughts. Malakar's approach was announced by the crunch of gravel underfoot. The Necromancer moved with a predatory grace, his dark robes whispering against the ground. His eyes, sunken in a pale face, fixed on Leo with unnerving intensity. "This one," Malakar said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. "It glows. It moves with purpose when it should be mindless." Two hulking skeletal enforcers stepped forward, their bones reinforced with iron bands. They seized Leo by the arms, their grip cold and unyielding. He didn't resist. Knight's resolve, whispered tactics, break the left one's elbow joint, pivot, use momentum against the right, but he forced the skill's knowledge down. To fight now would confirm Malakar's suspicions. They dragged him toward a sunken pit at the camp center. The ground here was packed earth stained dark with old blood and ichor. Around the pit's rim, dozens of undead gathered, skeletons with empty eye sockets, zombies with rotting flesh hanging from bones, even a few ghouls with too many teeth. They made no sound, but their attention was a palpable weight. Malakar raised a hand. "My creations grow complacent. They forget what it means to hunger. Today, we remind them." He gestured, and from a cage on the far side of the pit, something emerged. It was a zombie, but unlike any Leo had seen. 8 feet tall, with muscles that had swollen in death to grotesque proportions. Patches of gray skin stretched taut over bulging tissue, while other areas showed bare bone reinforced with what looked like fused metal scraps. One arm ended in a crude hammer-like fist, the other in fingers that had grown into hooked claws. Its face was a ruin, one eye milky white, the other missing entirely, a jaw that hung slack revealing blackened teeth. "The champion of last month's harvest," Malakar announced. "Fed on 20 fresh corpses. Let us see if our glowing skeleton can provide more entertainment than the last dozen who faced it." The enforcers shoved Leo into the pit. He hit the ground rolling, elven agility, activating instinctively. His bones moved with a fluid grace that felt alien yet natural, carrying him to his feet in a smooth motion. The pit was 30 feet across, its walls too steep to climb. No weapons. No cover. Across from him, the zombie champion let out a wet, guttural roar. It wasn't a sound of anger or challenge, just empty noise, the vibration of dead tissue forced through a ruined throat. Then it charged. The ground shook with each step. Leo's borrowed memories surged. Sir Gareth's training screamed at him to hold ground, brace for impact, meet force with disciplined force. Lyra's instincts whispered to flee, to find high ground, to strike from shadows. Both were wrong for this. He waited until the last possible moment, then sidestepped with elven swiftness. The zombie's hammer fist swept through where he'd been, striking the pit wall with enough force to send clods of earth flying. Leo danced behind it, driving a fist into the small of its back. His reinforced bones held, but the zombie's dead flesh absorbed the blow without reaction. It turned, surprisingly fast for its size. A clawed hand swept toward Leo's skull. He ducked under, feeling the air stir above him. Knight's resolve, provided the pattern. The zombie was strong but predictable, all brute force with no technique. Elven agility gave him the means to stay ahead of it. For a full minute, he dodged and weaved, landing occasional blows that did nothing but chip bone against toughened flesh. Then the zombie changed tactics. Instead of chasing, it slammed both fists into the ground. The impact sent a shockwave through the earth, knocking Leo off balance. For a split second, he stumbled. That was all the champion needed. The hammer fist came down like a falling tree. Leo threw himself sideways, but not fast enough. The blow caught his left shoulder, shattering the collarbone and several ribs. Pain exploded through him, a cold, sharp sensation that had nothing to do with nerves he no longer possessed. It was the protest of breaking structure, the warning of imminent collapse. He rolled away, coming up with his left arm hanging useless. Blue-green energy flickered around the fractures, slowing but not stopping the damage. The zombie advanced, its milky eye fixed on him with mindless hunger. Sanity, 70%. The number floated in his vision, a constant reminder of what he was losing. He could feel it, the edges of his consciousness fraying. Sir Gareth's memories were bleeding into his own, Lyra's hatred coloring his thoughts. And beneath it all, a new hunger was growing. Not for survival. For consumption. The zombie charged again. This time, Leo didn't dodge. He ran straight toward it. At the last instant, he dropped into a slide, passing between the champion's legs. As he went under, he reached up with his good arm and drove his fingers into the back of the zombie's knee. Bone reinforcement made his hand a weapon, piercing dead flesh and severing tendons that should have long since rotted away. The champion stumbled, one leg buckling. It crashed to the ground, shaking the pit. Leo was on it in an instant, climbing its back like Lyra might have scaled a tree. He wrapped his legs around its torso, his good arm locking around its throat. The zombie thrashed, trying to throw him off. Its clawed hand reached back, tearing strips from Leo's ribcage. Bones cracked. Energy leaked from fractures like ethereal blood. But Leo held on. And he felt it. Beneath the rot and mindless hunger, a soul. Faint, frayed almost to nothing, the barest echo of whatever person this had once been. But it was there. And the Soulforge system recognized it. A prompt appeared in his vision. Soul detected, zombie champion. Potential skill, necrotic touch. Cost, 8% sanity. Absorb. Y/N. He hesitated. 70% sanity. How much lower could he go before he stopped being Leo entirely? Before he became just another monster, another hungry thing in a world full of them? The zombie bucked violently, slamming him against the pit wall. More bones fractured. His vision flickered with warning glyphs, structural integrity at 42%. Another hit like that and he'd shatter. The whispers grew louder. Sir Gareth, strike now. Don't hesitate when your enemy is vulnerable. Lyra, take what you need to survive. Everything else is sentiment. Leo made his choice. He pressed his hand against the zombie's skull and willed the absorption. The world dissolved into grey static. He was drowning in hunger. Not his hunger, the zombie's. An endless, bottomless need to consume. To tear flesh, to crack bones, to feel warm blood spill. There were no memories here, no personality, just the raw, primal urge of something that should have died but hadn't, something that kept moving because it didn't know how to stop. It filled him. Polluted him. When the vision cleared, he was standing over the zombie's motionless body. His hand was still pressed to its skull, and from his fingertips, dark energy spread like cracks in glass. The champion's flesh withered where he touched it, turning black and flaking away to dust. The bone beneath crumbled into powder. Necrotic touch acquired. Sanity, 62%. Warning, personality integrity at risk. Leo staggered back. The new skill burned in his awareness, a technique that channeled decay, that could rot flesh and crumble bone with a touch. It felt satisfying. Like scratching an itch he hadn't known was there. He looked at his hand. Thin tendrils of black energy coiled around his fingers before fading. The broken bones in his shoulder and ribs were knitting themselves back together, the fractures sealing with dark lines that looked like cracks in obsidian. The pit was silent. The undead spectators stared down, their empty faces somehow attentive. Malachar stepped to the edge. Fascinating, he murmured. It didn't just destroy the champion. It consumed it. The necromancer descended into the pit, his robes trailing in the dirt. He circled Leo, studying him like a specimen. You're not like the others. The souls you take, you keep them. Don't you? Leo remained still. The hunger from the zombie's soul still echoed in him, a dull ache that wanted more. More souls. More power. Most of my creations are empty vessels, Malachar continued. They break, I rebuild them. They fall, I raise new ones. But you grow stronger. You learn. He stopped in front of Leo. What are you? There was no point in pretending mindlessness now. Not after what he'd just done. Leo met the necromancer's gaze, the blue-green light in his eye sockets flaring briefly. Malachar smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Ah. There you are. I thought I sensed a spark in you that first day on the battlefield. He gestured, and the enforcers approached again. But this time, they didn't seize Leo. They simply flanked him. Come, Malachar said. You've earned something better than the grunt pits. They led him to a tent at the camp center, larger and better constructed than the others. Inside, shelves held jars of preserved organs and vials of glowing liquids. A stone table dominated the space, its surface stained with old blood and etched with necromantic runes. Malachar went to a chest and withdrew something, a set of bones that gleamed with a dark metallic sheen. They were larger than Leo's current frame, reinforced at the joints, with ridges along the forearms and shins that looked designed for combat. The skeleton warriors of the old Necromancer kings wore such frames, Malachar said, laying the bones on the table. Reinforced with alloys that drink magic. Strong enough to shatter stone. Fast enough to catch arrows. He turned to Leo. I can graft these to you. Make you into something more than a mindless soldier. Give you purpose beyond the hunger. Leo's stolen memories reacted. Sir Gareth recognized the offer for what it was, a bribe, a reward for service. Lyra distrusted it immediately, sensing the trap in the gift. But beneath both, the zombie's hunger whispered, take it. Take the power. Take everything. All I ask, Malachar said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is loyalty. The other necromancers grow restless. They eye my territories. My experiments. I need commanders. Not mindless drones, but thinking weapons. He placed a hand on the dark bones. Serve me, and I will make you a lord of the dead. A skeleton warrior who leads armies instead of marching in them. Who takes what he wants instead of waiting for scraps. In Leo's vision, his sanity bar pulsed. 62%. It seemed to waver, the numbers blurring for a moment before solidifying again. And behind the numbers, faces. Sir Gareth, kneeling before his family's graves. Lyra, watching her forest burn. The zombie champion, remembering nothing but hunger. And his own face, or what he thought was his own face, from a life he could barely recall. A man with worries about rent and work and whether he'd remembered to buy milk. A life so small compared to what he was becoming. Malachar was still waiting. The dark bones gleamed on the table, promising power. Purpose. And somewhere deep in what remained of Leo's mind, a voice that might have been his own whispered a question. How much more of yourself are you willing to lose? The ritual chamber stank of decay and ozone. Leo stood motionless as Malachar's acolytes chanted in guttural tones, their skeletal fingers tracing arcane symbols in the air that glowed with sickly green light. The necromancer himself circled Leo, his tattered robes whispering against the stone floor. You have proven, interesting, Malachar rasped, his voice like grinding bones. Most skeletons shatter under pressure. You adapt. You grow. This makes you valuable. Or dangerous. Leo remained silent, his glowing blue-green eyes fixed forward. The whispers had grown louder since the pit fight, Sir Gareth's tactical precision blending with Lyra's predatory instincts, both overlaid by the zombie's mindless hunger. His sanity bar hovered at 62%, a constant flickering reminder in the corner of his vision. Today, you become more, Malachar continued. He gestured, and two skeletal enforcers dragged forward a chained figure, a human mage, gagged and struggling, his robes marked with Dawn's Edge insignia. This one attempted to sabotage our advance. His soul will fuel your ascension. Before Leo could react, Malachar plunged a ritual dagger into the mage's chest. The man's scream was muffled by the gag, but his eyes widened in terror as his life essence began to seep out in shimmering silver threads. Instead of dissipating, the energy coalesced into a pulsating crystal shard that hovered above the corpse. Consume it, Malachar commanded. Leo hesitated. The Soulforge System's interface flashed before him. Soul shard detected, concentrated mage essence. Absorption will unlock, Skeleton Warrior Evolution. Sanity cost, 18%. Warning, massive personality erosion likely. But refusal meant destruction. The enforcer's bone-crushing grips tightened around his arms. Malakar's eyes narrowed dangerously. Leo reached out with a skeletal hand. The moment his fingers touched the shard, agony exploded through his frame. Bones cracked and reformed, thickening with dark metallic sheen. His stature grew, adding nearly a foot of height. Jagged bone spurs erupted from his shoulders and elbows, natural armor forming across his ribcage. The transformation felt like being remade in a forge, every joint realigning, every bone hardening beyond steel. But worse was the mental assault. The mage's memories flooded him, decades of study in Dawn's Edge's libraries, the precise geometry of spellcasting, the cold logic of arcane theory. There was no warmth here, no passion, just calculations and formulas. The mage had viewed living beings as variables in equations, emotions as inefficient biological processes. Evolution complete, Skeleton Warrior. Strength, enhanced. Durability, enhanced. Sanity, 44%. Warning, personality matrix fragmenting. Leo stumbled as the transformation completed. His new form felt powerful, terrifyingly so, but hollow. The mage's clinical detachment had seeped into him, making even his own horror feel like a distant observation. Excellent, Malakar purred. Now you lead the vanguard. Dawn's Edge has a village protecting their eastern flank. We harvested at midnight. The village of Oakhaven burned. Leo moved through the chaos with unnatural efficiency, his enhanced bones shrugging off glancing blows from farming tools turned weapons. Around him, mindless skeletons slaughtered screaming villagers while Malakar's acolytes worked their harvesting rituals, pulling shimmering soul threads from the dying. He should have felt revulsion. Instead, the mage's analytical perspective assessed the tactical situation, villagers clustering at the western gate, 3 acolytes maintaining the soul harvesting circle, Malakar overseeing from the central square. A young woman wielding a kitchen knife charged him. Leo sidestepped with elven agility, her blade scraping harmlessly across his reinforced ribs. He could have ended her with necrotic touch, but instead he used a modified Knight's Resolve technique, a precise strike to the temple that rendered her unconscious without killing her. The whispers protested. Weakness, Sir Gareth's memory growled. In war, mercy gets you killed. She's just meat, the zombie's hunger added. But Lyra's memory, surprisingly, offered something else: the forest doesn't kill needlessly. Only for survival. Leo moved on, his enhanced senses detecting magical signatures. Near the village well, an elderly man in scholar's robes chanted desperately, hands weaving a shimmering barrier that protected a cluster of children. A wizard, and his soul glowed with potent arcane energy. Soul detected, village wizard. Potential skill, arcane insight. Sanity cost, 20%. Warning, absorption may cause irreversible cognitive shift. Leo hesitated. His sanity already teetered at 44%. Dropping to 24% would push him dangerously close to complete personality dissolution. But the wizard's barrier glowed with complex runes, the same kind Malakar used in his binding rituals. Understanding it might be his only chance at freedom. The wizard met his gaze, eyes wide with terror but still chanting. Stay back, abomination. I won't let you. Leo moved. Elven agility carried him through the barrier's weakest point, a flaw in the runic pattern his enhanced perception now detected. His necrotic touch, enhanced hand plunged into the wizard's chest. The absorption was different this time. Not a flood of memories, but a torrent of knowledge. Spell structures, mana channels, barrier mechanics, ritual disruptions. The wizard had dedicated his life to protective magic, and now that lifetime of study became Leo's. Skill acquired, arcane insight. Sanity, 24%. Critical warning, humanity threshold breached. Coldness settled into Leo's mind. Emotions became distant concepts. The screaming villagers, the burning homes, Malakar's gloating, all just data points. The wizard's analytical framework had overwritten his remaining emotional responses. But the knowledge came with clarity. He could now see the soul-harvesting ritual structure, threads of energy connecting each acolyte to Malakar, all funneling through a central focus crystal. Disrupt the crystal, and the bindings holding the skeletons would shatter. Commander. Malakar's voice cut through the chaos. To me. The harvest is nearly complete. Leo approached the central square where Malachar stood over the focus crystal, his hands weaving final incantations. Dozens of soul threads shimmered in the air, connecting to twitching skeletons around the village. "You feel it, don't you?" Malachar said without looking up. "The power. The clarity. No more messy emotions. This is what true strength looks like." Using arcane insight, Leo analyzed the ritual. The crystal's frequency, the acolyte's harmonic alignment, the precise moment when the soul energy would be transferred to Malachar. There, a 3-second window when the crystal would be vulnerable. "Thank you for your service," Malachar continued. "But anomalous skeletons are too dangerous to keep. Once this harvest completes, I'll consume your empowered soul personally." The betrayal should have sparked rage. Instead, Leo calculated probabilities. Survival chance if he complied, 0%. Survival chance if he disrupted the ritual, 32%. Acceptable. He waited as Malachar's chanting reached its crescendo. The soul threads brightened, pulling taut. The acolyte's eyes glowed with transferred power. Now. Leo lunged, not at Malachar, but at the focus crystal. His bone reinforcement, hardened fist slammed into it at the exact harmonic frequency, arcane insight, identified. The crystal didn't shatter, it screamed, a high-pitched whine that shattered the ritual's symmetry. The backlash was instantaneous. Soul threads snapped like broken harp strings. Acolytes screamed as rebounding energy tore through them. Skeletons throughout the village froze, then began moving erratically as their binding commands dissolved. Malachar whirled, eyes blazing with fury. "You dare!" Leo didn't let him finish. Elven agility carried him behind the Necromancer as, Knight's resolve, guided a precise strike to the spine. Not fatal, Malachar was too powerful for that, but disabling. "Kill him!" Malachar shrieked at the nearest skeletons. They didn't move. Their empty eye sockets turned toward Leo, awaiting new commands. "You're free," Leo said, his voice now echoing with multiple tones, his own, the knights, the elves, the wizards. "Leave this place. Or fight him. Your choice." Some skeletons shambled away. Others turned on the remaining acolytes. Chaos erupted as Malachar's control shattered completely. Leo didn't stay to watch. He ran, his enhanced form carrying him through burning streets and into the dark woods beyond. Behind him, Malachar's enraged screams faded into the night. He ran until his borrowed strength gave out, collapsing in a moonlit clearing miles from Oakhaven. His body ached from the evolution, from the battle, from the accumulated trauma of stolen souls. The whispers had become a cacophony. Sir Gareth demanded order and discipline. Lyra urged him to hide, to become one with the forest. The zombie hungered for more flesh. The wizard coldly analyzed their survival odds. And beneath them all, Leo's own voice, faint, fractured, but still there, whispered, "What have I become?" His sanity bar flickered at 24%. The world seemed both hyperreal and distant. He could count every leaf on the nearby oak, calculate the wind speed from the grass bending, track 3 different nocturnal creatures by their heat signatures, but he couldn't remember what happiness felt like. A faint aura began to emanate from his bones. Not the blue-green glow of before, but something darker, a shimmering black mist that curled from his joints and eye sockets. Where it touched the grass, the blades withered and died. The Soulforge system displayed a new notification. Warning, sanity critical. Death aura manifesting. Personality cohesion, 18%. Imminent Lich King transformation if sanity reaches 0%. Leo tried to stand, but his limbs refused to obey. The accumulated madness, the knight's trauma, the elf's bitterness, the zombie's hunger, the wizard's cold logic, swirled through his fractured mind. Visions overlapped, a past life memory of sunlight on his face, human face, warm skin, Sir Gareth dying on a battlefield, Lyra watching her forest burn, the wizard calculating how many children his barrier could save. His body shuddered as the death aura intensified, killing plants in a slowly expanding circle around him. In the distance, wolves howled and fell silent, sensing the wrongness. He had escaped Malachar. He had freed other skeletons. He had survived. But as darkness crept across his vision and the whispers merged into a single, monstrous hunger, Leo wondered if the cost had been his very self. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was his own skeletal hand, wreathed in death mist, reaching for moonlight it could never feel. Leo's bones clattered against the rocky ground as he stumbled through the desolate hills. The death aura around him shimmered like heat haze on a summer day, a faint grey mist that clung to his skeletal frame and whispered of decay. His sanity bar hovered at 24%, a cold, constant reminder in his mind's eye. Every step felt heavier than the last, not from physical weight but from the accumulated memories pressing against the inside of his skull. Sir Gareth's disciplined battle stances overlapped with Lyra's fluid forest movements. The zombie champion's mindless hunger gnawed at the edges of his consciousness, while the village wizard's arcane formulas flickered behind his glowing blue-green eye sockets. They were all there, whispering, arguing, sometimes screaming. Only fragments of his own past life remained, a name, a feeling of warmth, the ghost of a laugh, drowning in the chorus of stolen souls. He had been wandering for 3 days since escaping Oakhaven. The wilderness stretched endlessly, jagged mountains to the north, dead forests to the south, and everywhere the scars of war. Burned villages, trampled fields, and the occasional corpse left to rot. Leo avoided them all, though the Soulforge system pulsed with temptation each time he passed something that had once been alive. His hunger for souls had become a physical ache, a hollow sensation in his ribcage that no amount of wandering could fill. On the 4th morning, he found a stream. The water ran clear over smooth stones, and for a moment, he simply watched it flow. His reflection showed a skeleton warrior transformed, dark bones reinforced with necrotic energy, joints that moved with silent precision, and those unsettling eyes that held too much awareness for an undead thing. He reached down, not to drink, for he needed no sustenance, but to touch the water. It felt cold against his finger bones. That's when he heard them. Voices, human voices, carried on the wind from downstream. Leo froze, his skeletal frame going perfectly still. Instincts from multiple souls warred within him, Sir Gareth's tactical caution, Lyra's predator-like stillness, the zombie's mindless aggression. He chose caution, melting back into the cover of dead brush along the bank. 5 humans emerged from around a bend in the stream. They moved with the weary gait of survivors rather than soldiers, though 2 carried spears and 1 had a notched sword at his hip. Their clothes were patched and stained, faces gaunt with hunger and fear. A woman with braided hair led them, her eyes constantly scanning the terrain. "We should turn back," a younger man said, his voice trembling. "This is too close to the Necromancer's territory." The woman shook her head. "The map says there's a cache ahead. Medicine, maybe food. We need it." They hadn't seen him yet. Leo calculated distances, escape routes. He could slip away upstream, lose them in the rocky terrain. That's what his remaining humanity wanted, to avoid conflict, to simply survive without adding more souls to the chorus in his head. Then the wind shifted. The death aura around him billowed outward, carried on the breeze. The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes widened as they locked onto his position in the brush. "Undead," she screamed. Chaos erupted. The 2 spearmen charged without hesitation, their weapons leveled. The younger man fumbled for a sling. The woman drew her sword, her movements practiced and grim. The 5th, an older man with a scar across his cheek, stayed back, watching with cold eyes. Leo didn't fight. He ran. Elven agility, activated without conscious thought. His bones became a blur of motion as he leaped over rocks, darted between trees, his feet barely touching the ground. Lyra's memories of forest pursuit flooded his mind, how to use terrain, how to move without sound, how to vanish like mist. But he wasn't an elf in a living forest, he was a skeleton in dead hills, and his death aura left a trail they could follow. "It's fast," one of the spearmen shouted. "Don't lose it," the woman commanded. "It's alone, we can take it." They pursued with desperate determination. These weren't trained soldiers but survivors hardened by war, and they knew the undead were relentless. If one escaped, it might return with others. Better to kill it now. Leo's hunger intensified with each passing moment. The Soulforge system pulsed in time with his frantic movements, whispering of the souls so close, so vulnerable. The zombie champion's memories surged forward, the satisfaction of tearing flesh, the warmth of fresh life extinguished. He pushed them down, clinging to Sir Gareth's discipline, to the fading echo of his own humanity. He reached a narrow canyon, its walls steep and crumbling. A dead end. Turning, he saw the humans spread out to block his retreat. The woman took the center, sword ready. The 2 spearmen flanked her. The younger man with the sling positioned himself on higher ground, a stone already whirling. The older man with the scar watched from the rear, his expression unreadable. "Cornered," the woman said, her voice flat. "Just like all the others." Leo raised his hands in what he hoped was a placating gesture. The words came out as a dry rasp, cobbled together from memories of human speech. Not, enemy. The humans stared, their faces showing confusion, then revulsion. A talking skeleton? Impossible. Undead were mindless, driven only by base instincts or a necromancer's will. It's a trick, the older man said, his voice like gravel. Some new abomination. The woman's eyes hardened. Kill it. The slinger released his stone. Leo dodged with elven agility, the projectile whistling past his skull. The spearmen charged in unison, their attacks coordinated, one high, one low. Leo parried the first spear with a forearm reinforced by bone reinforcement, the impact sending shivers through his frame. He twisted away from the second, but the woman was already there, her sword slicing toward his neck. Knight's resolve, activated. Sir Gareth's combat instincts took over. Leo dropped into a low stance, the sword passing over him. He struck upward with necrotic touch, his finger bones glowing with sickly green energy. The woman jerked back just in time, but the decay effect brushed her armor, eating through leather and tarnishing metal. She didn't retreat. It's using magic. Focus fire. They pressed him harder. The spearmen worked in tandem, keeping him off balance. The slinger peppered him with stones, one cracking against his ribcage. The woman's sword flashed with practiced efficiency, each strike aimed at joints, at the skull, at the dark energy core in his chest. Leo realized he couldn't win without killing. And if he killed, the hunger would win. The souls whispered louder, a cacophony of violence and need. Then the older man moved. He hadn't seemed like a threat, staying back, observing. But now he circled wide, moving with a veteran's economy of motion. He carried no obvious weapon, but his hands were calloused, his stance balanced. When he spoke, his voice cut through the combat. Flank left. Drive it toward the wall. The humans obeyed without question. They weren't just survivors, this man was their leader, their tactician. And he had just identified Leo's greatest weakness, his need to preserve what little sanity remained. The spearman shifted position. The woman fainted high. The slinger's stones came faster. And Leo found himself backing toward the canyon wall, his escape routes closing one by one. The older man's eyes met his. There was no hatred there, only cold calculation. This was a man who had seen too much death, who understood that in this world, you killed monsters before they killed you. He raised a hand, signaling the final push. In that moment, Leo made his choice. The hunger won. He lunged not at the spearman, not at the woman, but at the tactician. Elven agility carried him across the distance in a blur. The older man reacted with surprising speed, drawing a hidden dagger from his boot. But Leo wasn't aiming to strike with bone or necrotic energy. His hand closed around the man's wrist. Physical contact. The Soulforge system flared to life. A prompt appeared in Leo's vision, glowing with ominous light. Soul detected, veteran soldier. Quality, high, tactical experience, survivor's resilience. Absorption cost, 12% sanity. Potential skill, tactical awareness. Confirm absorption. Y/N. Leo didn't hesitate. He confirmed. The world dissolved into pain and memory. He was no longer in the canyon. He was in 100 battles, 100 retreats, 100 desperate stands. He saw the older man, his name was Kalen, as a young recruit, as a seasoned sergeant, as a leader who had watched his entire company die to necromantic horrors. He felt the weight of command, the agony of choosing who lived and who died, the cold resolve that let you send friends to their deaths if it meant saving others. He tasted stale rations and blood, smelled smoke and rotten fear. And through it all, one lesson repeated, outthink your enemy. Always outthink them. The absorption tore through Leo's remaining sanity. The bar dropped from 24% to 12% in a single, wrenching plunge. The chorus in his head gained a new voice, Kalen's, calm and analytical even in death, already assessing tactical options, evaluating threats. When Leo's vision cleared, Kalen was collapsing, his eyes going blank. The other humans froze, horror dawning on their faces. Captain, the woman screamed. But Leo was already moving. Tactical awareness, activated, and suddenly he saw the battlefield with perfect clarity. The spearman's stances revealed their next attacks. The slinger's rhythm indicated when he would reload. The woman's grief would make her reckless. He didn't fight them. He outmaneuvered them. Darting left, he feigned an attack on the slinger. The spearman shifted to intercept. Leo reversed direction, using the canyon wall to kick off and sail over their heads. The woman charged, but he landed behind her, already sprinting for the gap she had left. "Don't let it," she began. But he was already past them, elven agility, carrying him up the canyon wall in bounding leaps. Stones clattered after him, shouts echoed below, but they couldn't follow, not with Kalen's body lying there, not with their tactical mind gone. Leo didn't look back. He ran until the shouts faded, until the canyon was far behind, until his bones ached with exhaustion he shouldn't have been able to feel. When he finally stopped, he was deep in a forest of petrified trees, their stone branches clawing at a twilight sky. He collapsed against a trunk, the memories of Kalen washing over him. Lost comrades. A wife and child who had died in a village raid. The slow erosion of hope over years of war. The final calculation, 5 survivors needed medicine, so risking the canyon was worth it. Except it wasn't. Leo looked at his hands, the bones that had just stolen a life, a mind, a history. Kalen had been a monster killer. And what was Leo now? He had outsmarted the ambush, yes. He had survived. But he had consumed another soul, taken another life, added another voice to the chorus. Was I any better than Malachar? He rasped to the empty forest. The souls whispered back. Sir Gareth spoke of honor in survival. Lyra spoke of predators and prey. The zombie spoke of hunger. The wizard spoke of power. And now Kalen spoke of necessary sacrifices. But Leo's own voice, the one that remembered being human, grew fainter with every absorption. At 12% sanity, it was barely a whisper against the storm. As night fell, he pushed onward, drawn by some instinct he couldn't name. The death aura around him had grown thicker, more substantial. It curled off his bones like smoke, leaving faint trails in the air. Animals, the few that still lived in these blighted lands, fled at his approach. Plants wilted where he passed. He found the crypt at moonrise. It was half buried in a hillside, its entrance a dark archway framed by crumbling statues of armored figures. Their features had been worn away by time, but their stances spoke of guardianship. Leo hesitated at the threshold. Tombs meant dead things, and dead things might mean more temptation. But exhaustion won. He needed shelter, a place to rest without being hunted. The crypt would do. Inside, the air was cold and still. His footsteps echoed in a chamber larger than he expected. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating dust motes that danced in the silence. Along the walls, murals stretched from floor to ceiling, their colors faded but still discernible. Leo moved closer, his glowing eyes tracing the images. The first mural showed a kingdom in glory, towering spires, green fields, people with smiling faces. The second showed war, armies clashing, fire in the streets. The third showed a figure in dark robes raising skeletal hands as the dead rose from graves. The fourth showed that same figure crowned with dark energy, seated on a throne of bones. Around him knelt not just skeletons, but vampires, wraiths, creatures of shadow and decay. The Lich King. The mural depicted his rise in vivid detail, the sacrifices, the rituals, the moment he shed his last shred of humanity to embrace eternal power. Leo stared, frozen. The images mirrored his own journey, from sentience to power, from humanity to monstrosity. Was this his future? A throne of bones, a kingdom of death, his consciousness lost in a chorus of stolen souls. He turned away, seeking his reflection in a polished shield that lay against one wall. The metal was tarnished but still reflective. What he saw made the souls fall silent. His bony features had sharpened, taking on a more predatory cast. The dark energy that reinforced his bones now crackled visibly across his frame, tiny arcs of black lightning dancing between ribs, along arms, around his skull. His eye sockets glowed brighter, the blue-green light piercing the crypt's gloom. And the death aura, it was no longer just a haze. It swirled around him like a cloak, tendrils of grey mist that reached for the shadows. The whispers returned, louder than ever. Not just the absorbed souls now, but new voices, ancient, hungry things that seemed to come from the crypt itself, from the murals, from the very concept of lichdom. They promised power. They promised an end to the hunger, to the conflict, to the pain of holding on to fading humanity. They promised that at 0% sanity, he wouldn't lose himself, he would become something greater. Leo raised a hand, watching dark energy crackle across his finger bones. The reflection showed a monster. The murmurs promised a king. And in the deepest part of his mind, where 12% sanity still flickered, a single thought remained. How much longer could he resist? The crypt's air was thick with the dust of centuries, each particle catching the faint blue light that emanated from Leo's skeletal form. His death aura, a subtle, dark shimmer around his bones, disturbed the stagnant atmosphere, making motes dance in unnatural patterns. The whispers hadn't stopped since he'd entered. Sir Gareth's tactical murmurs blended with Lyra's elven laments, Kaelin's gruff commands, and the mindless hunger of the zombie champion. They formed a cacophony in the hollow spaces of his skull. He moved cautiously, his reinforced bones clicking softly against the stone floor. The murals he'd seen earlier depicted scenes of necromantic ascension, a skeletal figure crowned with dark energy, armies of undead bowing before it. Each panel felt like a mirror held too close. His reflection in a polished obsidian slab showed changes, the edges of his bones had taken on a sharper, more predatory aspect, and dark energy crackled at his joints like miniature lightning storms. Arcane insight provided fragmented understanding of the crypt's construction. The runes carved into the walls weren't merely decorative, they were containment sigils, ancient and powerful. His magical senses tingled with residual energy, the kind that spoke of souls bound against their will. The thought made the whispers grow louder. What if he was walking into another prison, just different from Malakar's? A section of the floor gave way with a sudden, grinding sound. Leo stumbled as stone shifted beneath him, his elven agility allowing him to pivot mid-fall and land in a crouch. But the damage was done. The triggered mechanism released a wave of spectral energy that coalesced into three translucent figures. They wore armor styles centuries out of date, ornate plate with heraldic symbols long faded from memory. Their faces were masks of eternal rage, eyes burning with cold blue fire. Intruder, the central ghost hissed, its voice like wine through dead leaves. You carry the stench of stolen souls. The other two flanked him, their semi-transparent forms passing partially through the stone walls. Leo's tactical awareness activated automatically, analyzing their movements. They weren't mindless, their positioning was deliberate, cutting off escape routes. The central ghost raised a spectral sword that shimmered with painful intensity. We are guardians, it declared. Bound here to protect the sanctity of the fallen. Your kind defile memory itself. Leo had no time to respond. The ghost on his right lunged, its blade passing through the air with a sound like tearing silk. He dodged with elven agility, but the weapon grazed his ribcage. Where it touched, a cold numbness spread, and his bones frosted over. Not physical damage, something deeper. Soul damage. He countered with necrotic touch, his fingers glowing with decay energy. They passed through the ghost's form with only minimal resistance, like dipping his hand into icy water. The ghost recoiled, its substance momentarily thinning, but it reformed almost instantly. Fool, it sneered. We are already dead. Your necromantic tricks mean nothing. The three closed in. Leo backed against a wall, his mind racing. Knight's resolve provided combat forms, Sir Gareth's memories of fighting spectral foes in forgotten campaigns. But those techniques required weapons blessed by clerics or enchanted with soul-binding magic. He had neither. Then, arcane insight flared. The runes on the walls weren't just containment, they were the source of the ghost's power. Bindings that anchored them to this place. If he could disrupt the patterns. He focused his magical senses, ignoring the advancing specters. The runes glowed in his perception, a complex web of energy channels. One particular sequence near the ceiling pulsed with the same rhythm as the ghost's movements. A master sigil. A spectral sword arced toward his skull. Leo dropped into a roll, bones scraping stone. He came up beneath the master sigil, reaching with both hands. Not to touch it physically, to manipulate the energy directly, as the village wizard's memories taught him. His fingers traced patterns in the air, pulling at the magical threads. The ghosts hesitated, their forms flickering. What are you doing? The central one demanded, its rage tinged with confusion. The sigil's glow intensified, then fractured. One of the flanking ghosts screamed, a sound of pure anguish, as its connection to the binding snapped. It dissipated into mist, but not before Leo felt the pull. The Soulforge System activated unbidden, drawn to the potent, ancient soul now released from its prison. No, he thought. His sanity was already at 12%. Another absorption might push him over the edge completely. But the system didn't care about his reservations. The ghost's essence flowed into him, a torrent of centuries-old bitterness and warrior pride. Memories flooded his consciousness, a great battle against necromantic hordes, a betrayal by living allies, centuries bound in this crypt watching intruders come and go. The rage was all-consuming, a fire that had burned for longer than kingdoms had stood. Sanity drained. 12%. 10%. 8%. It plummeted to -6%, crossing into negative territory for the first time. The world tilted. The whispers became shouts. Sir Gareth's voice merged with the ghost's memories until Leo couldn't tell where one ended and he began. Was he the knight who died defending a keep? The elf who fell to an arrow? The veteran who lost his squad? Or just a collection of stolen lives? New knowledge crystallized through the madness. Phantom step, the ghost's ability to become semi-ethereal. He could feel the technique in his bones, a shifting of his substance between solid and spectral states. The remaining two ghosts attacked simultaneously. Leo didn't so much dodge as phase, his body becoming translucent as their weapons passed through him. The sensation was disorienting, like being both here and elsewhere, solid and mist. He reappeared behind them, striking with necrotic touch. This time, the decay energy interacted differently with their spectral forms, causing them to fray at the edges. Impossible, the central ghost whispered. You steal even our essence. Leo didn't answer. He was too busy fighting the ghost's memories, which were trying to overwrite his own. The ghost's name had been Alaric. A captain of the Dawn Wardens, an order dedicated to destroying undead. The irony wasn't lost on what remained of Leo's consciousness. He used Phantom Step, again, becoming ethereal to avoid a sweeping attack, then solidifying to deliver a reinforced bone fist to the central ghost's face. The impact scattered spectral energy like broken glass. The ghost reeled, its form growing unstable. Finish it, Alaric's memories urged. They are abominations. Destroy all undead. But Leo was undead. The thought created a cognitive dissonance that made his skull ache. He absorbed the second ghost's soul as it dissipated, the system drinking greedily. Sanity dropped further, -6% to -18%. The numbers meant less now, he was in uncharted territory, his humanity a distant memory. The last ghost, the central one, watched him with something like pity. You don't even understand what you're becoming, do you? Then it charged, not with rage, but with what looked like resignation. Leo met it with Phantom Step, passing through its attack and appearing inside its spectral form. For a moment, they occupied the same space, two warriors from different eras, both bound to death. Then Leo absorbed its soul too. Sanity, -30%. The crypt fell silent except for Leo's rattling breaths. He collapsed to his knees, the accumulated memories of 4 ancient warriors warring in his mind. Alaric's centuries of imprisonment. The others' deaths in battle. Their hatred for necromancy. Their contempt for the undead. And he was undead. The contradiction threatened to shatter what remained of his coherence. He clung to one thought, forward. Always forward. Deeper into the crypt. The chamber beyond the Guardians was smaller, dominated by a stone pedestal. On it rested not an artifact, but a slate tablet covered in inscriptions. The language was archaic, but arcane insight provided translation. It spoke of a soul anchor, a legendary artifact created during the first necromantic wars. Not to enhance power, but to stabilize it. To allow a soul-forged being to retain identity despite multiple absorptions. To prevent the descent into mindless monstrosity. According to the inscription, it had been broken into fragments and scattered after the fall of the Lich King depicted in the murals. One fragment might be found in the City of Echoes, whatever that meant. Hope, fragile and dangerous, flickered in Leo's consciousness. A way to halt the sanity drain. To reclaim something. Not his humanity, that ship had sailed at negative sanity, but at least coherence. Identity. He reached for the tablet, bony fingers extending. Shadows in the chamber deepened, coalescing behind the pedestal. A presence older than the crypt, older than the ghosts, stirred. 2 points of crimson light ignited in the darkness, eyes filled with malevolent intelligence. The air grew cold enough to frost Leo's bones despite his undead nature. Interesting, a voice whispered, not through the air, but directly into Leo's consciousness. It bypassed his ears and spoke to the collection of stolen souls within him. A patchwork creature, stitching itself together from scraps. And you seek the anchor. The shadowy form solidified slightly, a silhouette of regal bearing, crowned with dark energy. The Lich King from the murals, or a remnant of it. Its interest felt like physical pressure, weighing on Leo's very soul. "Tell me, little skeleton," it murmured, the words dripping with ancient malice. "What will you sacrifice for stability?" Leo's hand froze inches from the tablet. The presence's gaze held him, seeing not just his current form, but every soul he'd absorbed, every memory he'd stolen. And in its eyes, he saw not just threat, but something worse, recognition. The shadow coalesced from the crypt's deepest darkness, taking form as a wraith of pure malevolence. Its body was a swirling vortex of ash and sorrow, with hollow eyes that drank the faint light from the crystalline artifact. Before Leo could react, it lunged. A spectral hand passed through his ribcage. Cold. Not the chill of death, Leo knew that intimately, but something deeper. A void that sucked at the very essence of what remained of him. His sanity, already a negative abyss at -30%, shuddered as if pulled toward that emptiness. The Soulforge system flashed a warning he didn't need, life drain detected. Essence erosion in progress. Leo stumbled back, bones scraping against stone. The wraith didn't pursue immediately. It hovered between him and the soul anchor, the crystalline shard resting on a pedestal of black marble. The artifact glowed with a soft, silver light that seemed to pulse in time with some forgotten heartbeat. "You hunger," the wraith whispered, its voice the sound of crumbling tombs. "I can taste it. The emptiness where your soul should be." Leo's hand went to his chest where the wraith had touched him. No physical damage, but something felt, thinner. As if part of him had been siphoned away. The whispers of absorbed souls, Sir Gareth's knightly honor, Lyra's elven grace, Kaelin's tactical genius, the three Dawn Warden ghosts' ancient hatred, all rose in a cacophony of panic. He pushed them down. Forced focus. Arcane insight, activated almost instinctively. The skill, stolen from the village wizard's soul, parsed the wraith's nature, a remnant of the Lich King's power, left to guard this place. Not truly alive, not truly dead. A being of pure negative energy that fed on life force and sanity alike. Its touch didn't just damage, it unraveled existence itself. "You will not have it," Leo said, his voice rasping through a jawbone that felt too sharp, too predatory. The wraith laughed, a dry, rustling sound. "It is not for you, little skeleton. The anchor stabilizes souls. You have none left to stabilize." Another lunge. Faster this time. Leo activated, elven agility, the skill from Lyra's soul granting him unnatural speed. He twisted aside, the wraith's fingers grazing his shoulder. Another wave of cold. Another piece of him stolen. His sanity ticked downward, -31%. He couldn't afford to be touched again. Phantom Step, the newest skill from the Dawn Warden ghosts. Leo's form blurred, becoming semi-transparent as he phased through a stone column. The wraith followed, its ash body flowing around obstacles like smoke. "Running will not save you," it hissed. "Your kind always runs. Always fears the inevitable." Leo emerged behind the pedestal. The soul anchor was within reach, a shard about the length of his forearm, crystalline and cool to the touch even from a distance. Its silver light seemed to push back the crypt's shadows. The wraith materialized directly in front of him. "Mine." This time, Leo didn't dodge. He met the attack with necrotic touch, the decaying strike he'd gained from some forgotten soul. His bony fingers crackled with dark energy as they slammed into the wraith's chest. The effect was immediate and violent. The wraith screamed, a sound that wasn't sound but a vibration in reality itself. Its form rippled, ash dispersing and reforming. But it didn't dissipate. Instead, it seemed to absorb the necrotic energy, growing darker, more solid. "Fool," it rasped. "You feed me with your own corruption." Leo backed away, mind racing. Physical strikes were useless. Magical attacks empowered it. The wraith was designed to counter everything he had. Except. The Soulforge system pulsed in his consciousness. A new prompt appeared, glowing with ominous crimson text, essence conflict detected. Wraith's negative energy resonates with host's sanity deficit. Absorption protocol available. Warning, sanity cost, 25%. 25%. From already -31. That would put him at -56. He'd be more monster than man. More lich than Leo. The wraith advanced, sensing his hesitation. "Yes. Fear it. The power you crave will consume what little remains of you. Memories flashed, not his own, but stolen ones. Sir Gareth dying with honor. Lyra's last arrow flying true. Kaelin ordering his men to fall back while he held the line. Alaric, Torvin, and the other Kaelin standing against a tide of undead centuries ago. All of them had chosen sacrifice. What was he choosing? Survival? At what cost? The wraith's hand reached for his skull. Leo could feel the cold from inches away. He made his decision. Knight's Resolve, activated, granting temporary sentience and combat clarity. Tactical awareness, mapped the crypt's layout, calculating angles and trajectories. Bone reinforcement, hardened his frame. Elven agility, prepared his body. Arcane insight, analyzed the wraith's energy patterns. Phantom step, readied for the final maneuver. All at once. All burning through his remaining self. Leo didn't attack the wraith. He attacked the space between them. Phasing forward with phantom step, he passed through the wraith's outstretched arm. The cold was excruciating, like being dissolved from the inside out. His sanity plummeted, -40%, -45%, the numbers blurring together. As he emerged on the other side, he didn't turn. Didn't hesitate. He reached for the soul anchor with one hand. With the other, he reached for the wraith. Not to strike. To embrace. The wraith realized his intent too late. No. You cannot. Leo triggered the absorption protocol. The world dissolved into screaming darkness. It wasn't like absorbing other souls. Those had been memories, skills, fragments of identity. This was pure essence. The wraith had no past, no personality, only purpose and hunger. And now that hunger became his. The Soulforge system burned crimson in his mind, absorption complete. New ability unlocked, Soul Devourer. Passive aura weakens undead foes within 20 meters. Sanity drain, 25%. Current sanity, -56%. The numbers meant nothing anymore. He was beyond percentages. Beyond humanity. Leo collapsed to his knees, the soul anchor clutched in his hand. The crystalline shard felt warm now. Alive. Its silver light pulsed against his dark energy, creating ripples of conflicting power around him. The wraith was gone. Absorbed. But its essence remained, a nihilistic despair that settled in the hollow spaces between his bones. Where once he might have felt triumph or relief, now there was only numbness. The emotional spectrum had narrowed to a single point, existence, and the need to continue it. He examined his new ability. Soul Devourer wasn't a skill he activated. It was simply there, an aura that emanated from him constantly. He could feel it pushing against the crypt's ancient stones, against the remnants of magic in the air. Any undead that came near him would find their power diminished, their movements sluggish. The ultimate predator of his own kind. The irony didn't amuse him. Nothing did anymore. Slowly, he rose. His body had changed again. Dark energy crackled around his frame in visible arcs of purple-black lightning. His bones looked sharper, more angular, as if carved from obsidian rather than calcium. When he moved, he left faint afterimages, ghosts of motion that lingered for half a heartbeat before fading. He was becoming something else. Something the world would fear. The soul anchor pulsed in his hand. He focused on it, and for the first time since his sanity had gone negative, he felt something. Not healing. Not restoration. But stabilization. The frantic whispers of absorbed souls quieted slightly. The constant pull toward complete transformation eased, if only by a fraction. Soul anchor detected. Passive sanity regeneration, 0.5% per day. Insufficient to counter active drains. 0.5% per day. At that rate, it would take over 3 months just to reach zero again. And that was if he never used another ability, never absorbed another soul. An impossibility in this world. But it was something. A thread to cling to in the drowning dark. Leo tucked the artifact into a makeshift pouch fashioned from tattered cloth, remnants of some long-dead occupant's robe. The crystal's light dimmed when concealed, but he could still feel its presence against his ribs. A tiny point of silver in a cavern of black. He turned to leave the crypt. The murals on the walls seemed to watch him, ancient depictions of a Lich King rising, armies kneeling, worlds burning. One panel showed a figure not unlike what he was becoming, a skeletal champion wreathed in dark energy, leading the dead against the living. The title came unbidden, rising from the collective memories of absorbed souls, Death's Harbinger. He paused at the crypt's entrance, moonlight filtering through cracks in the stone. For a moment, he tried to remember. Not the stolen memories, but his own. The life before this one. The man he had been. His name. It was there. On the edge of consciousness. A word that had meant something once. An identity that had been his alone. He reached for it. And it slipped away like smoke through bony fingers. All that remained was the echo of what others called him in their dying moments: monster, abomination, undead. And now, from the souls he'd consumed, Death's Harbinger. Leo, if that was still his name, stepped into the night. The forest around the crypt seemed to recoil from his presence. Trees withered slightly where he passed. Small creatures fled before him. His soul devourer, aura pulsed invisibly, a sphere of anti-life that made the very air feel dead. He had the artifact. He had a new power. He had survived. But as he looked down at his hands, bones crackling with dark energy, fingers that had ended so many lives, he wondered what exactly had survived. The man was gone. The skeleton remained. And something else was waking up in the hollow spaces between. The border town of Greymoor huddled against the foothills like a wounded animal. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, grey tendrils that dissolved into the overcast sky. Leo approached from the east, his skeletal form hidden beneath a heavy woolen cloak scavenged from the crypt. The fabric smelled of dust and decay, but it concealed the dark energy that now crackled around his bones, a visible aura of shifting shadows that grew more pronounced as his sanity sank deeper into negative territory. He could feel the soul anchor resting against his ribcage, a cool crystalline weight that pulsed with faint, steady energy. 0.5% per day. A drop in an ocean of madness. At -56%, the whispers had become a constant chorus. Sir Gareth's knightly honor warred with Lyra's elven disdain. Kaelin's tactical calculations overlapped with the Dawnwarden's ancient hatred of undeath. And beneath it all, the Wraith's nihilistic despair echoed, a cold void that threatened to swallow what little remained of Leo's own thoughts. He remembered, or tried to remember, his human name. The memory slipped like water through bony fingers. Death's Harbinger, the souls called him. He pushed the thought aside as he reached the town's outskirts. Greymoor was a place of sharp contrasts. On one side, makeshift barricades of wagons and timber formed a defensive perimeter manned by human militia. Their faces were grim, weapons clutched with white-knuckled determination. On the other, near the old stone chapel at the town's center, figures moved in dark robes, their movements purposeful and synchronized. The air tasted of ozone and old blood. Leo kept to the shadows of an alley between a blacksmith's forge and a boarded-up tavern. His tactical awareness activated automatically, analyzing the scene. Two factions. Humans preparing for a stand. Cultists preparing for something else. The Soulforge system hummed in his consciousness, a hungry presence that noted the potential souls around him. A shout echoed from the militia line. They're gathering at the chapel. Archers, ready. Leo's arcane insight tingled. He could see the subtle weave of necromantic energy coalescing around the chapel, threads of dark power drawing from ley lines beneath the town. A ritual. Large scale. Dangerous. He needed information. And to get it, he needed to get closer. Using phantom step, he blurred across the open square, his form becoming semi-transparent for a heartbeat. He reappeared behind a stack of crates near the chapel's side entrance. The skill cost him nothing in sanity, it was a permanent ability now, but using it felt like leaning into the undead nature he was trying to resist. A cultist stood guard at the door, a young man with fever-bright eyes and pale skin. He clutched a dagger with a bone handle. Leo observed him for a moment, then stepped forward, letting his cloak fall open just enough to reveal the glint of bone beneath. The cultist's eyes widened, but not with fear. With recognition. "Brother," he whispered. "You've come for the ascension." Leo said nothing. His voice, when he used it, was a dry rasp of bone on bone. He'd learned to minimize speech, it unsettled the living, and the effort reminded him of how far he'd fallen from humanity. The cultist gestured him inside. "The master awaits the worthy. Your aura, it's strong. You'll be perfect for the inner circle." The chapel's interior had been desecrated. Pews were overturned, and the altar was covered in black candles and intricate chalk circles. A dozen cultists chanted in low, guttural tones. At the center stood a taller figure in ornate robes, the leader, Leo assumed. The air was thick with the promise of power and the stench of sacrificial blood. Leo's Soul Devourer ability stirred. The passive aura weakened undead, but here, surrounded by living cultists tapping into necromancy, he could feel their life forces like candles in the dark. Tempting. So tempting. He moved deeper into the chapel, his elven agility making his steps silent. He needed to understand their plan. The soul anchor's regeneration was too slow. If there was a way to accelerate it, or to find another artifact. He found his opportunity near a side alcove. A cultist, a woman with hollow cheeks and a network of scars on her arms, was arranging ritual components, black feathers, vials of mercury, and a small, beating heart in a glass jar. She glanced at Leo, mistaking him for one of her own. The convergence is near, she murmured. The death god will rise from the sacrificed souls. The master says we'll become his heralds. Leo's hand shot out, bony fingers closing around her throat. She gasped, but before she could scream, he focused the Soulforge system. The familiar, terrible pull began. Her soul resisted, a tangled knot of fanaticism and desperation, but he was stronger. He absorbed it. Sanity drain, -10%. The cost flashed in his mind. His total dropped to -66%. The cultist's memories flooded him, years of poverty, a desperate search for meaning, the sweet poison of the cult's promises. She believed utterly in the coming apocalypse. She wanted to burn the world so she could rule the ashes. And with her soul came a new skill. Dark persuasion. The ability to twist words, to tap into fears and desires, to make the susceptible see him as ally, master, or savior. Leo released the corpse. It crumpled to the floor, already cooling. He felt nothing. No remorse. The wraith's despair whispered that nothing mattered anyway. The cultist's fanaticism whispered that power was the only truth. He used dark persuasion on the next cultist he encountered, a nervous man arranging candles. The master needs you at the western glyph, Leo rasped, layering the skill into his voice. The man's eyes glazed over, and he hurried away. Step by step, Leo infiltrated deeper. He learned the ritual's purpose. At midnight, when the town's ley lines aligned, the cult would sacrifice every militia soul captured in the upcoming battle to summon a fragment of a death god, a being that would anoint their master as the new Lich King. The master was not here yet, he was preparing elsewhere, drawn by the ritual's energy. Leo's remaining humanity, a faint, flickering thing, recoiled. Mass soul sacrifice. A Lich King. He'd seen what that meant in the crypt's murals. Endless hunger. Eternal tyranny. But another part of him, swollen with negative sanity and the voices of absorbed souls, calculated. The ritual's energy was immense. If he could disrupt it, perhaps claim some of that power for himself. He found the ritual's heart, a crystal focus embedded in the floor below the altar, pulsing with stolen life force from previous, smaller sacrifices. The militia was gathering outside, he could hear their shouts. The cultists were readying for the final phase. Leo acted. Using necrotic touch, he decayed the chalk lines of the outermost circle. The energy flickered. A cultist noticed and raised an alarm. Traitor. They swarmed him. Leo fought with cold efficiency. Knight's resolve guided his movements, parry, strike, pivot. Bone reinforcement turned aside daggers. Elven agility let him dance between them. He didn't absorb their souls, he couldn't afford the sanity cost. Instead, he broke bones, shattered skulls, used phantom step to appear behind their leader. The head cultist, a gaunt man with eyes like coal, raised a hand. Necromantic energy lashed out. Leo countered with his own dark aura, Soul Devourer, weakening the spell before it struck. He drove a reinforced fist through the man's chest. The ritual destabilized. The crystal focus cracked. Energy rebounded, throwing cultists against walls. The chapel shook. Leo staggered back, dark energy flaring around him. His cloak had torn in the fight, revealing his full skeletal form, the sharpened bones, the visible aura, the hollow eye sockets that glowed with stolen soul light. At that moment, the chapel doors burst open. The human militia charged in, led by a grizzled captain. They saw the carnage. They saw Leo standing amidst the dead cultists, his bony form wreathed in shadows. Undead, the captain roared. It's a trap. He's with them. Before Leo could react, before he could use dark persuasion, or flee, the air in the chapel grew deathly cold. A figure materialized near the shattered altar. Tall, skeletal, clad in tattered royal robes, with a crown of twisted iron floating above its skull. Eyes of green fire burned in its sockets. A lich. The cult's master. It looked at Leo, then at the dead cultists, then at the terrified militia. Its voice was the sound of tombs opening. Interesting. You have disrupted my little project. But I sense potential in you. The Soulforge burns bright in your core. You are not like these mindless servants. The Lich extended a bony hand. Join me. Together, we could forge a kingdom of the dead. No more hiding in shadows. No more clinging to fading humanity. Embrace what you are becoming. Leo stood frozen. The offer echoed the whispers in his mind. Power. Purpose. An end to the struggle. But the militia captain raised his sword, his face a mask of hatred. Destroy them both. They're all monsters. Arrows knocked. Swords gleamed. Leo was caught between the Lich's offer and the militia's blades, his true form exposed, his sanity at -66%, and the soul anchor's feeble regeneration doing nothing to calm the storm within. The chapel air thickened with the scent of blood and ozone. Leo stood between the Lich's skeletal grin and the militia captain's trembling sword, his cloak torn away to reveal bone polished to obsidian sheen by the dark energy coiling around him. The soul anchor pulsed against his ribcage, a cold comfort. Join me, the Lich hissed, its voice like grinding tombstones. Your Soulforge potential is wasted on these cattle. Together, we could unmake kingdoms. Leo's mind raced. Sanity, -66%. The number glowed crimson in his vision, a ticking countdown to oblivion. The militia captain, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his jaw, leveled his blade. Traitorous bone walker. You led us into this slaughter. I stopped their ritual, Leo rasped, the words foreign even to himself. How long since he'd spoken aloud? The memories of Sir Gareth's nightly cadence felt like someone else's dream. Lies, the captain spat. Men, form ranks. Archers, ready. 20 militiamen shuffled into position, their faces pale with terror. Behind them, the Lich raised a hand, necrotic energy crackling around bone fingers. Choose, little skeleton. Power or dust. Leo reached for the soul anchor. The crystalline artifact hummed, its passive regeneration too slow, 0.5% per day, a drop in an ocean of madness. But he could force it. He focused, pouring his will into the gem, and felt a sharp jolt as it flared with silvery light. Sanity, -61%. A temporary reprieve, bought with strain that cracked 2 of his ribs. Now, he whispered. He moved. Elven agility propelled him forward in a blur of dark energy and bone. The militia captain swung, Leo parried with a forearm hardened by bone reinforcement, sparks flying where steel met enchanted skeleton. He didn't want to kill them. The thought surfaced, fragile, a remnant of the man he'd been. But survival demanded sacrifice. The first militiaman died to a necrotic touch, his flesh withering to ash under Leo's palm. The soul tore free, a shimmering wisp of light and memory, a farmer's son, conscripted, terrified of the dark. Leo absorbed it. The Soulforge system chimed. Sanity, -63%. Another fell, then a third. Each soul brought flashes, a wife's smile, a child's laugh, the taste of bread. Each one eroded him further. His movements became more fluid, more deadly, guided by knight's resolve, and tactical awareness, but the humanity behind those skills faded to echoes. The Lich watched, amused. Good. Let the hunger consume you. Leo ignored it. He focused on the souls. 5. 10. The chapel floor grew slick with blood. With each absorption, the dark energy around him intensified, swirling into a visible vortex of shadow. The militiamen broke, their courage shattered. They screamed, dropping weapons, stumbling over corpses. Then the prompt appeared, searing into his consciousness. Soul threshold reached. Activate, Aura of Dread. Cost, 30% sanity, ***. He hesitated. -63% to -93%. It would push him to the brink. But the Lich was gathering power, necrotic runes forming in the air. The remaining militia, a dozen men, were regrouping, their fear turning to frantic rage. Do it, he told himself, and the voice was cold, hollow, a stranger's. He activated the ability. The world exploded into silent terror. A wave of palpable dread radiated from Leo, visible as rippling black mist. Militiamen froze, eyes wide, mouths open in soundless screams. Some dropped, clutching their chests, others fled, mindless with panic. Even the Lich staggered back, its necrotic energy flickering. Leo felt the cost. Sanity, minus 93%. The drop was a physical blow, a tearing sensation deep in his non-existent core. Visions of his past life, a sunny field, a woman's face, his own name, dissolved into static. He grasped for them, but they slipped through his fingers like smoke. What was his name? He couldn't remember. Only Leo, a label given by the system, and Death's Harbinger, a title whispered by absorbed souls. His body changed. Bone spikes erupted from his shoulders and spine, jagged and black. Glowing runes, deep violet, pulsing with stolen soul energy, etched themselves across his skull and limbs. The dark energy aura solidified into a cloak of shadows that trailed behind him, whispering with the voices of the dead. The Lich recovered, its amusement gone. Impressive. But you are broken. Your mind cannot hold. Leo didn't answer. He turned and ran, phantom step, letting him phase through the chapel wall into the moonlit streets of Greymoor. Behind him, the Lich's laughter echoed, but no pursuit came, the aura had bought him time. He fled the town, a streak of darkness across the wilderness. Hours blurred. The soul anchor worked, slowly ticking his sanity upward, minus 92.8%, minus 92.6%. Too little, too late. The damage was done. He felt empty, a vessel filled with other people's memories and regrets. The farmer's son's terror lingered, mixing with the cultist's fanaticism and the ghost's ancient hatred. At dawn, he reached a desolate peak overlooking the war-torn lands. Below, smoke rose from burning villages, armies clashed like ants in the valleys. He stood there, bone spikes catching the first light, runes glowing faintly. The wind howled, carrying the scent of death. The Soulforge system chimed again, a final, solemn tone. Evolution available, Lich King candidate. Accept. Warning, one more major sanity drain will extinguish your core identity permanently, ***. Leo, if that was still his name, gazed at his hands. They were no longer simple bone, they were weapons, adorned with intricate carvings that told stories of slaughter. He tried to feel something, regret, fear, hope. But there was only numbness, and beneath it, a deep, cold hunger for more souls, more power. He did not accept the evolution. Not yet. But the prompt hung in his vision, a ghostly reminder, the point of no return was here. He had crossed it with every soul absorbed, and now there was no going back. Only forward, into the darkness he was becoming. Leo sat on the desolate peak, the soul anchor cradled in his skeletal hands. The crystalline artifact pulsed with a faint, steady light, a heartbeat in the darkness. Around him, the war-torn land sprawled like a scarred canvas, but his attention remained fixed on the object that offered his only sliver of hope. The Soulforge system had whispered its name when he first touched it, but now, as he focused his will, deeper truths began to surface. His fingers traced the intricate carvings on the anchor's surface. They weren't mere decorations, they were a map. Lines of silver energy responded to his touch, glowing brighter as he channeled a trickle of the dark energy that now perpetually shrouded his form. The runes shifted, rearranging themselves into coherent patterns. Memories stirred, not his own, but those absorbed from the wraith in the crypt. Fragments of ancient knowledge, cold and clinical, rose to the surface of his consciousness. The soul anchor is but one piece, the knowledge whispered. *3 were forged in the age of sundering. Together, they form the trinity of equilibrium, a ward against the soul's erosion. Leo's eye sockets flared with crimson light. The revelation hit him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a passive regeneration device, it was part of a set. And if one piece could slow his sanity drain, what might three do together? The system confirmed it with a silent pulse of information, displaying a schematic in his mind's eye, 3 interlocking crystals, their combined power capable of stabilizing even the most fractured soul. But the other 2 pieces weren't lying forgotten in some tomb. According to the memories, they were guarded. The map now glowing on the anchor's surface pointed northeast, to a place marked with runes that translated to Valley of Echoing Souls. The description that followed was less comforting, *, a cursed land where ancient guardians protect the artifacts from those who would misuse them. The guardians are constructs of stone and magic, immune to fear, pain, or persuasion. Their soul cores power them, and must be claimed to pass, *. Leo stood, his bones creaking with the motion. The dark energy around him swirled, responding to his agitation. He checked his status. Sanity, minus 93%. The number glared at him, a countdown to oblivion. The soul anchor's regeneration was pitifully slow, 0.5% per day. At this rate, it would take months to reach even minus 80%, and the system's warning echoed in his mind, one more major drain, and he would lose himself completely. The evolution prompt to Lich King candidate hovered at the edge of his awareness, a tempting, monstrous promise. No. He needed those other artifacts. Now. He descended from the peak, moving with the unnatural grace granted by elven agility. The land below was a patchwork of burned villages and trampled fields, but he avoided the signs of human habitation. His aura of dread still lingered faintly around him, a subconscious emanation that made wildlife flee and even the wind seemed to still in his presence. He didn't bother with a disguise this time, the cloak from Greymoor was tattered, and his true form was beyond hiding. Bone spikes protruded from his shoulders and spine, glowing with faint necrotic energy. Runes etched themselves into his femur and skull, pulsing with dark light. He was becoming something other, something that belonged in nightmares. 2 days of travel brought him to the edge of the Valley of Echoing Souls. The transition was abrupt. One moment, he walked through sparse, sickly forests, the next, he stood before a chasm that seemed to swallow the light. The valley walls were sheer black stone, carved with runes older than any civilization he remembered. A mist clung to the ground, thick and silent. No bird sang here. No insects chirped. The only sound was the faint echo of his own footsteps, bouncing back at him as if mocking his presence. He stepped into the valley. The air grew cold, a deep, penetrating chill that even his undead form registered. The mist parted before him, revealing a path paved with smooth, dark stones. To either side, statues stood watch. They were humanoid in shape but twice Leo's height, carved from the same black stone as the valley walls. Their features were blurred by time, but their poses were unmistakably vigilant. As he passed the first pair, their heads turned with a grinding of stone on stone. Empty eye sockets tracked his progress. Guardian constructs, the system supplied. Activated by intruders. Soul cores detected, *. Leo didn't wait for them to attack. He lunged forward, phantom step, carrying him in a blur of motion. His fist, reinforced by bone reinforcement, slammed into the chest of the nearest construct. The impact sent cracks radiating across the stone, but the creature didn't falter. Its arm swung, a massive fist that would have shattered ordinary bone. Leo dodged, elven agility, letting him weave under the blow. He struck again, aiming for the same spot. More cracks appeared. The second construct joined the fray, its movement slow but powerful. Leo danced between them, his mind working with the cold efficiency of tactical awareness. These weren't living beings, they had no fear to exploit with aura of dread, no mind to influence with dark persuasion. They were machines of stone and magic, and they would keep coming until he was destroyed or they were. He needed their soul cores. Focusing, he activated necrotic touch. Dark energy coalesced around his hand, and he drove it into the crack he'd created in the first construct's chest. The stone blackened and crumbled, revealing a glowing orb within, pulsing with a steady, blue light. The construct froze, its movement ceasing. Leo reached in and grasped the core. It was cool to the touch, and as his fingers closed around it, the Soulforge system activated automatically. Soul core absorbed. Construct Guardian. Sterile, logical memory patterns detected. Ability unlocked, Construct's Fortitude. Cost, 15% Sanity, *. Leo didn't hesitate. He accepted. The core dissolved into energy that flowed into him. His bones shuddered, and for a moment, he felt heavier, denser. New runes etched themselves across his ribs, glowing with a steadier, more enduring light. His skeletal frame hardened, the bone taking on a metallic sheen. But the cost, the sanity drain hit him like a wave of ice. Visions flickered, not of pain or emotion, but of endless calculations, geometric patterns, and the cold logic of a machine that had stood guard for centuries. There was no hatred here, no fear, just purpose. And as those sterile memories settled into him, something in Leo grew more distant. The last fragments of his human emotions, the ghost of laughter, the memory of warmth, receded further into the fog. Sanity, minus 108%. The number should have terrified him. Instead, he felt only a grim acknowledgement. He was deeper in the negative than ever before, but the transformation brought tangible power. He turned to the second construct, now moving with renewed determination. This time, when its fist descended, Leo didn't dodge. He raised his arm, and the blow landed with a sound like a hammer striking anvil. His bones held. No cracks. No pain. Construct's fortitude was working. He dismantled the second guardian with brutal efficiency, claiming its core and absorbing it. Another 15% sanity drain, but he didn't feel the additional erosion as sharply, the sterile memories blended with what had already been lost. He was becoming a creature of logic and purpose, his humanity buried under layers of absorbed experiences. The path led deeper into the valley. More guardians appeared, sometimes singly, sometimes in pairs. Leo fought them all, each battle a grinding exercise in endurance. He used Knight's Resolve to maintain focus, arcane insight to identify weak points in their magical bindings, and his newly enhanced durability to withstand their attacks. Each core he absorbed added to his construct's fortitude, stacking the ability's effects. His bones became nearly impervious to physical blows, but with each absorption, the sterile memories piled up. He could now calculate trajectories and structural weaknesses with instant, unconscious precision, but he couldn't remember the color of his mother's eyes. After what felt like hours, time blurred in the mist-shrouded valley, he reached a circular plaza. In its center stood a shrine of white marble, stark contrast to the black stone everywhere else. On an altar within rested a second crystal, identical in size to the soul anchor but glowing with a warmer, golden light. The heart of equilibrium, the memories supplied. But between Leo and the artifact coiled a guardian unlike any he'd faced. It was spectral, translucent like a ghost, but vast. A dragon, its form woven from shimmering energy and memories. Its wings stretched across the plaza, and its eyes burned with chaotic, shifting colors. This wasn't a construct of sterile logic, this was a soul, vast and ancient, and it radiated power that made the air hum. As Leo stepped into the plaza, the spectral dragon raised its head. Its voice echoed not in the air, but in his mind, a torrent of images and emotions, battles from forgotten wars, the joy of flight, the rage of betrayal, the despair of entrapment. It was a soul of chaos, and it had been bound here to guard the artifact for eternity. Before Leo could react, the valley itself trembled. The runes on the walls flared to life, chains of light snapping into existence and anchoring themselves to the dragon. The creature roared, a soundless cry of rage that shook Leo to his core. The awakening power of the valley surged, and the dragon's form solidified, becoming more real, more deadly. The artifact gleamed on the altar, so close. But between it and Leo stood a guardian whose soul was a maelstrom, and the very ground quaked with ancient magic stirring from its long slumber. The spectral dragon's form solidified from mist and memory, scales shimmering with captured starlight and ancient malice. Its breath came first, not fire, but a wave of pure disintegration that turned the air to shimmering dust. Leo threw himself aside, bones scraping against stone as the breath passed where he'd stood. The ground there didn't just burn, it ceased to exist, leaving a perfect hemispherical void. He scrambled behind a shattered pillar, the metallic sheen on his bones catching the dragon's attention. Another breath blast shattered the pillar to powder. Fragments of his reinforced frame cracked under the impact, painless but alarming in their structural failure. Construct's fortitude, held, but barely, the dragon's power operated on a scale beyond mere physical destruction. Direct combat is suicide, the thought came not as emotion but as sterile calculation, courtesy of the construct's logical memories now woven through his consciousness. The dragon circled, its vast wings stirring the valley's eternal mists. Each beat of those wings echoed with the screams of 1,000 forgotten souls. Leo activated arcane insight. The world shifted, he saw not just the dragon, but the patterns of its existence. It wasn't a living creature but a construct of bound chaos, a guardian woven from the valley's accumulated spiritual energy. Its purpose, protect the heart of equilibrium. Its weakness, it was bound by rules older than its rage. Tactical awareness, layered over the arcane sight. The dragon's movements became predictable equations. It would attack again in 3.2 seconds, breath aimed at his current position. It would then attempt to pin him against the shrine wall. Standard Guardian protocols, aggressive but patterned. When the breath came, Leo was already moving, not away but toward the shrine's central dais where the heart glowed with soft silver light. The dragon roared, the sound shaking loose stones from the valley walls. Its massive head swung down, jaws wide enough to swallow him whole. Wait. Leo projected the thought through his dark energy aura, enhanced by dark persuasion. I am not here to steal. I seek understanding. The dragon paused, one glowing eye the size of a shield fixing on him. Thief. Desecrator. You consume what you do not understand. The voice wasn't sound but vibration in his very bones. I have consumed many souls, Leo admitted, standing his ground as the dragon's hot breath washed over him. Each has taught me. The knight's honor. The elf's grace. The mage's knowledge. Even the sterile logic of constructs. I offer this knowledge in exchange for the artifact. The dragon's eye narrowed. Knowledge? You think to bargain with memories stolen from the dead? Not stolen, preserved. Leo reached into the cacophony within him, the voices of all he'd consumed. He projected them outward, Sir Gareth's final stand against overwhelming odds, Lyra's connection to ancient forests, the village wizard's wonder at his first spell, even the cultist's twisted devotion. The memories swirled in the air between them, ghostly images flickering in the mist. The dragon watched, its rage momentarily stilled by curiosity. You carry them all within you. A library of the departed. The heart of equilibrium is part of a set, Leo continued, sensing the dragon's shifting attention. The Trinity. I possess the soul anchor. Together they may restore balance, not just for me, but for this valley. Your prison of endless guarding. For the first time, the dragon's form wavered. The Trinity was thought lost when the last Lich King fell. Its voice held something new, not rage, but something like longing. I have guarded this peace for 7 centuries. Watching souls pass through, never touching, never knowing. Let me take it, Leo pressed. Let me complete what was begun. In return, I will share all I learn. Your vigil ends not in theft, but in purpose fulfilled. The dragon lowered its head until they were eye to socket. There is a price. The artifact is bound to me. To take it, you must take a piece of what guards it. Leo's sanity bar flickered in his vision, already at -108%. What piece? My fury. The rage that has sustained me these centuries. Take it into yourself, and the binding breaks. The Soulforge system presented the option, Dragon's Fury, devastating area attacks fueled by primordial rage. Cost, 40% sanity drain. Warning, this absorption will exceed critical thresholds. Personal identity markers may be permanently overridden. He had no choice. The militia would be hunting him. The Lich from Greymoor would be seeking him. And somewhere, the true Lich King waited. He needed power now, not later. Do it, Leo said. The dragon's form dissolved into swirling energy. Not the sterile logic cores of constructs, but raw, ancient emotion, 7 centuries of imprisoned fury, of watching over a treasure no one came to claim, of being bound to duty while the world forgot. It flowed into Leo, and he screamed. This wasn't like other absorptions. Those had been memories, skills, personalities. This was pure emotion, undiluted by thought or identity. Rage at confinement. Fury at being forgotten. Wrath at the endless, meaningless vigil. It burned through him, scouring away what little remained of Leo. His last personal memory surfaced, a woman's face from his past life, smiling. Her name danced at the edge of consciousness. Then the dragon's fury washed over it, and the face dissolved into the rage. Her name vanished forever. When it was done, Leo stood trembling. His sanity read -148%. The voices within him had grown, not just the ones he'd collected, but now the dragon's endless roar of frustration. They clamored for attention, for expression, for release. But the heart of equilibrium lay before him, unguarded. He took it, and as his bony fingers closed around a warm silver orb, something shifted. The soul anchor in his inventory resonated with it. His sanity didn't increase, but it stopped its slow, constant drain. Stabilized at -148%. He looked at his hands. Bone spikes had grown along his forearms, sharper and darker than before. Glowing runes now covered every visible surface of his skeleton, pulsing with captured energies. And when he touched his skull, he felt them, crown-like growths forming at the temples, curling upward like the beginnings of antlers or a dark coronet. The dragon was gone, its purpose fulfilled. But its fury lived in him now, a constant pressure behind his eyes. The voices whispered, argued, screamed. Sir Gareth demanding honor. Lyra singing forest songs. The constructs calculating probabilities. The cultist whispering dark prayers. And over them all, the dragon's roar of ancient rage. He was no longer Leo. He was the library. He was the fury. He was the crown forming on dead bone. And somewhere in the war-torn lands below, something ancient stirred, sensing a new candidate approaching the throne it had guarded for millennia. The heart of equilibrium pulsed in Leo's skeletal grasp, its warmth a mockery of the cold void spreading through what remained of his consciousness. The valley of echoing souls lay silent around him, the spectral dragon's form dissipated into mist after their transaction. But the silence was a lie. A tremor began in the earth, subtle at first, then building into a violent shudder that sent cracked spiderwebbing through the ancient stone of the shrine. Leo's newly acquired, construct's fortitude, kept him steady, the metallic sheen on his bones catching the fading light as the valley's magical glow began to dim. His mind, a cacophony of stolen voices, with the dragon's primordial rage now a constant roar at the forefront, registered the threat before his eyes saw it. From the eastern pass, shadows flowed like ink across water. They resolved into ranks of undead, skeletons with rusted weapons, zombies dragging decayed limbs, ghouls with too many teeth. At their center, borne aloft by 4 skeletal palanquin bearers, came the Lich. He was exactly as Leo remembered from Greymoor's chapel, robes of midnight velvet embroidered with silver sigils that pulsed with necrotic energy, a staff of blackened bone topped with a glowing green orb, and eyes that were pits of cold intelligence in a desiccated face. But now he brought an army. Little anomaly, the Lich's voice echoed across the valley, bypassing ears to resonate directly in the soul space Leo no longer fully possessed. You have been busy. The soul anchor. The heart. 2 pieces of the Trinity gathered by a mindless grunt who should have broken long ago. Leo's response was not words. The voices within him clamored, Sir Gareth's knightly honor screaming at the abomination before them, Lyra's elven grace recoiling from the necrotic stench, the dragon's rage boiling to the surface. His bone-spiked fingers tightened around the heart, and the runes covering his skeleton flared with violet light. I am Malakar's successor, the Lich continued, his palanquin halting 100 yards away as his army fanned out to surround the shrine. He was a fool to let you slip his leash. But I see your potential. That crown forming on your skull. The artifacts in your hands. You stand at the precipice, little skeleton. Let me give you the final push. Leo's tactical mind, a composite of Kaelin's veteran instincts, the unnamed mage's arcane calculations, and his own fading logic, assessed the battlefield. 300 undead minimum. The Lich himself, a master necromancer of unknown power. The valley's terrain, shrine on elevated ground, but surrounded on 3 sides. His own abilities, 15 soul-forged skills, 2 artifacts, and sanity stabilized at -148% but brittle as glass. You want the artifacts, Leo said, his voice no longer his own but a chorus of all he'd consumed. The words echoed with dragon growl undertones. I want what they will make you, the Lich corrected. A perfect vessel. The Lich King this age requires. Your stubborn humanity has been an interesting experiment, but it's time to complete the transformation. Hand over the artifacts, submit to my binding, and I will make the transition painless. Your identity will simply cease. Memories surfaced, not Leo's, but the cultists. Dark rituals, sacrifices, the ecstasy of power over life and death. The Lich had been her master. He'd been watching Leo since Greymoor. Planning this. No, Leo said. The Lich sighed, a sound like dry leaves scattering. Then we do this the wasteful way. He raised his staff. The green orb blazed, and the entire undead army surged forward as one. Leo didn't wait for them to reach him. He dropped the heart beside the soul anchor at his feet, where they began to hum in resonance. Then he unleashed Dragon's Fury. The ability didn't manifest as fire or lightning. It was pure, concentrated rage given form, a wave of psychic violence that erupted from Leo's skeletal frame. The air rippled visibly, turning the color of bruised flesh. The first rank of skeletons simply disintegrated, their bones turning to powder mid-stride. Zombies exploded into chunks of rotting flesh. Ghouls shrieked as their minds shattered. The cost was immediate. The Soulforge system flashed in Leo's perception, sanity -20%. He was at -168% now, and the dragon's rage within him swelled, threatening to drown out every other voice. His crown-like bone growths elongated, becoming more pronounced. Sharp edges formed. But the army kept coming. The Lich was at the rear, staff weaving complex patterns as he reinforced his troops with necrotic energy. Fallen skeletons reassembled. Zombies knit themselves back together. Leo moved. Elven agility made him a blur of bone and shadow as he descended from the shrine. Necrotic touch crackled around his hands, he slammed into a zombie champion, and the creature's entire upper body decayed to dust in seconds. He absorbed its meager soul automatically, the system noting the negligible power gain against the constant background noise of stolen identities. He fought mechanically, efficiently. Knight's resolve guided his movements with perfect combat forms. Phantom step let him phase through attacks. Aura of dread radiated from him now without conscious effort, weaker undead faltered merely approaching him. But there were too many. A skeleton warrior's axe bit into his ribcage. Construct's fortitude prevented serious damage, but the impact rattled him. A ghoul's claws scraped across his skull, leaving glowing rune scratches. Leo reached deeper. Soul Devourer. He didn't just absorb the souls of those he killed now, he actively ripped them from nearby undead. Tendrils of dark energy lashed from his hands, piercing a dozen skeletons at once. Their eye sockets went dark as their animating force was torn free and funneled into Leo. Power flooded him. Strength. Speed. The temporary high of stolen life force. The cost, sanity -25%. -193%. The voices within him screamed in unison. The dragon's rage, the knight's honor, the elf's grace, the mage's logic, all blending into a single, discordant shriek of existence being unmade. Leo's vision swam with overlapping memories that weren't his, a childhood in a village that burned centuries ago, a first kiss with a woman whose name he'd never known, the cold satisfaction of a necromancer's first successful raising. He was losing track of which memories were stolen and which might have been his own. Did it matter anymore? The Lich watched from his palanquin, unmoved. Impressive, he called out. But unsustainable. Your sanity cannot withstand much more. When it breaks completely, you will be mine regardless. Leo carved a path through the undead toward him. Bone spikes sheared through rotting flesh. Necrotic energy withered everything it touched. He was a whirlwind of death, and with every soul he consumed, the crown on his skull grew more defined, more ornate. He reached the palanquin. The skeletal bearers attacked, these were no mindless grunts but enhanced creations with combat skills. Leo dispatched two with precise strikes enhanced by tactical awareness, but the third landed a blow that cracked his femur. Pain was a distant concept now, registered only as structural damage. The Lich finally moved. He floated down from the palanquin, staff held before him. Let us end this farce. He cast a spell. Not necromancy, something older. The ground beneath Leo turned to grasping shadows that coiled around his bones, holding him fast. The Lich approached, green orb glowing brighter. I have studied the Soulforge system for centuries, the Lich said, almost conversational. Malachar stumbled upon it. I perfected it. The Trinity of Equilibrium was always meant to create the ultimate undead sovereign. But it requires a vessel with a particular resilience. Most candidates break at -100% sanity. You've nearly doubled that. Remarkable. Leo struggled against the shadows. Dragon's fury roared within him, but the Lich's spell dampened its expression. The final piece, the Lich continued, reaching for the artifacts Leo had left at the shrine. They floated toward him, pulled by invisible strings. The crown of equilibrium. When combined with the other two, it completes the set. And when placed on a suitable candidate's head. He smiled, a horrific stretching of leathery skin. Well. You'll see. The heart and soul anchor floated before the Lich. He began a chant in a language that hurt to hear, words that predated humanity, that spoke of entropy and endings. The artifacts glowed, then melted into streams of liquid light that swirled together, taking shape. Forming a crown. It was beautiful in a terrible way, intricate bone-like filigree woven with veins of glowing energy, set with 3 gems that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat that shouldn't exist. Now, the Lich said, turning back to Leo. For the final ingredient. You're willing, or unwilling, submission. He extended a hand toward Leo's skull. The shadows tightened. Leo made his choice. Not with logic or emotion, both were too frayed now, but with instinct. The instinct to survive. To dominate. To be more than what he was. He stopped resisting the shadows. Instead, he reached inward, to the very core of the Soulforge system, to the mechanism that had defined his existence since awakening in Malakar's army. And he inverted it. Instead of absorbing souls, he offered one. Not a stolen soul. His own. What remained of it? To the Lich. It was a gambit born of arcane insight, understanding of magical bonds and the cultist's memories of soul transference rituals. Leo opened the floodgates of his accumulated identities, not to expel them, but to use them as bait. The cacophony within him became a siren song, a feast of power no necromancer could resist. The Lich's eyes widened. What are you? Then understanding dawned. And greed. Centuries of seeking power, and here was a vessel containing dozens of souls, including a fragment of primordial dragon rage. The Lich's defenses wavered for a fraction of a second as he reached not to destroy Leo, but to claim that power for himself. That was all Leo needed. He activated Soul Devourer at maximum intensity. But not outward, inward. Toward the connection the Lich had just established. And he pulled. The Lich screamed. Not in pain, but in outrage as the tables turned. His soul, centuries old, steeped in necromantic knowledge, a tapestry of dark ambitions and colder calculations, began to unravel toward Leo. No, the Lich shrieked, trying to sever the connection. Too late. Leo had him. And he didn't just absorb the soul. He consumed it. Devoured it whole. The system flashed, soul absorption, Master Necromancer. Ability gained, Master Necromancy. Sanity cost, -50%. Leo's sanity plummeted. -193% to -243%. Something broke. Not in the world, but in Leo. The last tether snapped. The final memory, the woman's face from his past life, the one he'd been clinging to even as her name faded, dissolved like smoke in wind. Her smile. Her eyes. Gone. The voices within him fell silent. Not gone, but integrated. Blended into a single consciousness that was no longer Leo, but something else. Something greater and emptier. The shadows holding him dissipated. The Lich's body collapsed into dust, robes settling empty on the ground. The undead army froze, then began to crumble as the animating force that bound them vanished. Leo stood alone in the valley. The newly formed crown of equilibrium floated before him, completing its formation. It was magnificent. Terrible. His. He reached for it. His bone-spiked fingers closed around the circlet. It was warm. Alive in a way nothing should be. He turned. The remnants of the battle surrounded him, piles of bones, scattered zombie parts, the empty robes of the Lich. A throne of corpses waiting for a king. Leo climbed. Step by step, he ascended the largest pile, near the shrine where this had begun. The crown in his hand seemed to pulse in time with the runes now covering every inch of his skeleton. With the bone spikes that had become elegant, deadly protrusions. With the crown-like growths on his skull that seemed designed for this moment. At the summit, he paused. Some final ghost of resistance stirred, a whisper from a man who had once been named Leo, who had feared this exact moment since first understanding the Soulforge system. The whisper said, "Don't." Leo ignored it. He raised the crown. And placed it on his head. It fit perfectly. The bone growths interlocked with the filigree. The three gems aligned with his eye sockets and forehead. Energy flooded him, not just power, but purpose. Clarity. The cacophony was gone, replaced by perfect, cold silence. The voices were still there, but they were his now. Tools in a toolbox. Memories in a library. Not people. Not identities. Resources. The crown of equilibrium merged with his skull, becoming part of him. The soul anchor and heart within it hummed in perfect harmony. His sanity, frozen at -243%, ceased to be a relevant metric. He was beyond sanity. Beyond humanity. He looked out over the valley. Over the world beyond. And he understood what he was meant to do. What he had been forged to become. The last whisper of Leo faded, carried away on a wind that smelled of grave dust and endings. In its place, a title settled into the silence of his soul. Lich King Ascendant. The crown of equilibrium pulsed against his skull, a rhythm of power that matched the slow, deliberate beat of a heart he no longer possessed. Lich King Ascendant stood upon the mound of bones that had once been his enemies, his skeletal frame now a masterpiece of necrotic artistry. Runes etched in cold fire covered every bone from clavicle to phalanges, glowing with the captured essence of countless souls. The crown had fused completely, its metallic substance flowing into his skull to form intricate bone spires that rose like a jagged diadem. His eye sockets burned with twin flames, one blue with the chill of undeath, one crimson with the dragon's fury that now dominated his consciousness. Around him, the valley of echoing souls lay silent. The spectral dragon had dissipated after their bargain, leaving only the whispering ghosts of the valley's ancient dead. The cult lich's army was dust and memory, their soul essence absorbed into the Trinity artifacts that now thrummed with impossible power. The soul anchor hung from his ribcage on a chain of solidified shadow, the heart of equilibrium embedded in his sternum where a living man's heart would have been, and the crown was him. Conquer, whispered the dragon's voice, a rumble of volcanic anger that vibrated through his bones. Consume all. Make this world ash and memory. Control, countered the sterile logic of the constructs, their voices layered like mathematical equations. Establish dominion. Efficiency requires complete subjugation. Power, hissed the Necromancer cultist's memory, slick with ambition. You are the pinnacle. None can stand before the Lich King. A cacophony of 100 other voices joined them, knights and elves, wizards and soldiers, all the souls he devoured on his descent into monstrosity. Their memories swirled in his consciousness like sediment in a stirred pond, each fighting for dominance. Their desires, their fears, their madness, all his now. His sanity stood at -243%, a number that meant nothing and everything. There was no humanity left to measure against, only the hollow where Leo had once been. Yet. Something stirred in that hollow. Not a voice, not a memory, a resonance. A pattern of thought that didn't belong to any of the absorbed souls. When the dragon roared for conquest, this resonance flinched. When the constructs calculated optimal slaughter ratios, this resonance hesitated. It was faint, eroded almost to nothing, like the last echo in an empty cathedral. But it was there. Purpose. He had come here seeking something. Not power for its own sake, but, to stop something. To prevent something worse than what he had become. The memory was gone, eaten by the Soulforge system along with everything else, but the shape of the intention remained, etched into the architecture of his being like fossilized bone. The Trinity artifacts hummed in unison, their vibrations creating a harmonic that resonated through the valley. The air shimmered with potential. Lich King Ascendant raised a hand, bones now sheathed in dark metal, fingers ending in razor-sharp points, and examined it. This was the ultimate form. The pinnacle of necromantic evolution. With the crown's power, he could raise armies from dust. With the heart's stability, he could maintain his consciousness indefinitely. With the anchor's connection, he could drain souls from continents away. He could be a god of death. The resonance within him trembled. No, it whispered, so quiet it might have been imagination. This wasn't the goal. The dragon's fury roared in response, drowning out the feeble protest. Weakness. Crush it. Lich King Ascendant closed his fist, and the valley obeyed. The ground trembled. Bones rose from the earth, assembling themselves into skeletal warriors without conscious command. The very air grew heavy with necrotic energy, causing the ghostly echoes to wail in fresh torment. Power flowed through him, limitless, intoxicating. This was what the system had promised. This was the destiny written into his bones the moment he first absorbed Sir Gareth's soul. But the resonance. It showed him something. Not a memory, but a possibility. A path not taken. A man who might have chosen differently at any of 100 junctures. A man who might have found another way. Illusion, hissed the cultist's voice. Sentimentality. You are beyond such things. Statistically improbable, chimed the constructs. The optimal path is clear. Lich King Ascendant looked inward, through the storm of stolen voices, to the core of the Soulforge system itself. The artifacts weren't just tools, they were keys. Keys to the mechanism that had remade him. Keys to the entity that had designed this entire cruel economy of souls and sanity. He focused the Trinity's power, channeling it through arcane insight, the wizard's understanding of magical structures, and, master necromancy, the lich's comprehension of soul mechanics. The three artifacts flared with simultaneous light, their energies weaving together into a single beam of concentrated will that pierced not space, but reality itself. The world dissolved. He stood in a place of pure concept. No ground, no sky, only shifting patterns of meaning and causality. This was the Soulforge System's core, the metaphysical engine room where souls were processed, abilities generated, and sanity quantified. And at its center hung a fragment of something ancient and terrible. It had no form that could be described in mortal terms, but Leo's consciousness, or what remained of it, perceived it as a weeping wound in existence. A shard of a dead god, perhaps, or the ghost of a concept that should never have been born. It pulsed with the same rhythm as his crown, because the crown was its creation. The entire system was its attempt to what? To resurrect itself? To create a worthy successor? To spread its nature through a willing vessel? Lich King, the entity communicated, not with words but with direct infusion of understanding. You have completed the trial. You have consumed sufficient souls, sacrificed sufficient sanity, proven your worthiness to become my vessel. Assume the mantle. Become the new death god. Remake this world in our image. The offer unfolded before him like a tapestry of infinite possibility. He saw himself ascending, his physical form transforming into pure necrotic energy. He saw worlds burning, souls harvested on an industrial scale, reality itself bending to his will. He saw eternity stretching before him, not as a curse, but as a kingdom. And he saw the cost. The last resonance would be extinguished. The final ghost of purpose that had driven Leo would be consumed as fuel for the apotheosis. There would be no memory of why he'd started this journey, no echo of the man who'd feared becoming exactly this. There would only be the god. The dragon's voice screamed approval. The constructs calculated the efficiency of godhood. The cultist wept with envious joy. But from the hollow place came one last surge, not of memory, but of will. A refusal written in the bones of a being who had already lost everything except the choice itself. No, Lich King Ascendant said, and for the first time, it was his voice alone. Not the cacophony of stolen souls, but the singular tone of a decision made at the precipice. He reached for the death god fragment with every ability he possessed. Soul Devourer, activated at maximum capacity, not to steal a piece of this entity, but to consume it whole. Dragon's Fury, channeled into the effort, turning the absorption into an act of violence. Master Necromancy, inverted the system's own mechanics, turning the God-Eater into the eaten. The entity recoiled, then fought back. This wasn't part of its design. A vessel was supposed to submit, to merge, not to attempt consumption. But Lich King Ascendant had learned from the best, from dragons and liches and all the hungry dead. He had become the ultimate predator of souls, and now he turned that predation on the hunter itself. The cost was immediate and catastrophic. His sanity, already at minus 243%, began to plummet. Minus 250%. Minus 275%. Minus 300%. The numbers lost meaning as they passed thresholds no mortal mind could comprehend. Each percentage point represented another piece of his composite consciousness unraveling. The dragon's rage faded first, its fury dissolving into static. The construct's logic fragmented into nonsense. The cultist's ambition evaporated like mist. All the stolen voices went silent, one by one, as the energy required to maintain them was diverted to the impossible task of devouring a god fragment. Minus 350%. Minus 400%. The death god fragment screamed in a language that broke reality. It fought back with concepts of entropy and endings, with the absolute certainty of decay that was its nature. But Lich King Ascendant had already embraced decay. He was decay given form. He was the ending made manifest. And he had one advantage the fragment hadn't anticipated: he had already lost everything. There was nothing left for it to threaten, no sanity to strip away, no humanity to corrupt. He was a hollow vessel, and now he would drink the ocean. Soul Devourer, maximum output. Cost, total sanity depletion. Ability gained, Godslayer's will. The fragment shattered. Not into pieces, but into understanding. Into knowledge. Into the raw, unformed potential of a divine concept unmade. And Lich King Ascendant, or whatever he was now, absorbed it all. For a moment that stretched across eternity and collapsed into an instant, he knew everything the death god had known. He saw the system's blueprint, saw how it could be rewritten, saw the single point of flexibility the fragment had left for its own eventual replacement. A choice. The psychic realm reshaped itself around his perception. He stood at a crossroads between two realities, each represented as a path stretching into infinite distance. To his right, godhood. The death god's mantle awaited. He could step into it and complete the transformation. His physical form, currently back in the valley, would crystallize into a true death god body, immortal, invincible, beyond mortal concerns. The Soulforge system would become his to command absolutely. He could rewrite its rules, make it serve his will entirely. But to do so, he would have to erase the last resonance. He would have to willingly sacrifice the final ghost of Leo, the purpose that had brought him here. The god would be born, but the man would be utterly annihilated, not just forgotten, but retroactively unmade. It would be as if Leo had never existed at all. To his left, sacrifice. He could use the Godslayer's will ability, the power gained from consuming the fragment, to rewrite the Soulforge system from within. He could break its fundamental law, the equation that traded sanity for power. But the cost would be the power itself. All of it. Every ability gained from every soul absorbed. Knight's resolve, elven agility, necrotic touch, dragon's fury, master necromancy, all of it would be undone. The Trinity artifacts would shatter. His physical form would revert to something closer to his original state, a simple skeleton, fragile and limited. But the resonance would remain. Not as a memory, not as a personality, but as a possibility. A chance to rebuild something from the ashes. A sliver of humanity preserved not in substance, but in potential. As he contemplated the paths, he felt his physical body beginning to change. Back in the valley, his bones were already crystallizing, transforming from organic calcium into something harder and colder. The process was irreversible once begun. He had minutes, perhaps seconds, to decide. Godhood offered everything he'd ostensibly fought for: power, security, dominion. A kingdom of death where he would never be vulnerable again. Sacrifice offered almost nothing. Weakness. Mortality. The certainty of eventual destruction. But it also offered something the godhood path explicitly destroyed: the right to have been wrong. The right to have made mistakes. The right to have been a man who feared becoming a monster, even as he became one. The dragon was gone now. The constructs were gone. The cultist was gone. All the voices were silent, consumed in the battle with the death god fragment. Only the resonance remained, faint as a dying breath. It didn't speak. It didn't beg. It simply was. And Lich King Ascendant, who had once been Leo, who had been a skeleton soldier, who had been a man in another life, made his choice. He turned left. In the Valley of Echoing Souls, the crystallizing process reached his skull. The crown of equilibrium glowed with final, desperate intensity as it felt its purpose being rejected. The heart of equilibrium beat one last time, a pulse that shook the valley. The soul anchor trembled on its chain. And then, all at once, they shattered. The explosion of released energy threw bones in every direction, carved fresh scars in the valley floor, and sent shockwaves through the necrotic ley lines of the region. Where Lich King Ascendant had stood, there was only a crater. And at its center, a simple skeleton lay in the dust. No runes glowed on its bones. No crown adorned its skull. No artifacts hung from its frame. Its eye sockets were dark and empty. For all appearances, it was just another mindless undead, no different from the thousands it had destroyed. But deep within the hollow ribcage, where no heart beat, a single spark of will flickered. Unformed. Unnamed. But undeniably present. And in the psychic realm, the path of sacrifice stretched before him, leading into darkness and uncertainty, but leading somewhere. The valley lay silent, a graveyard of shattered bones and lingering necrotic energy. Leo stood at its center, his transformation complete. Bone spires rose from his shoulders like jagged wings, glowing with the same runes that now covered every inch of his skeletal frame. The crown of equilibrium had fully merged with his skull, forming intricate bone patterns that resembled a monarch's diadem. His eye sockets burned with twin flames of violet and crimson, the colors of the death god's influence and his own stolen souls. Around him, the undead army that had followed the cult lich knelt in perfect formation. Skeletons, zombies, and ghouls, hundreds of them, bowed their heads to the ground. Their collective will pressed against his consciousness, a chorus of empty devotion waiting for his command. The air hummed with power. With the Trinity artifacts integrated, he could feel every soul in the valley, every whisper of death magic in the soil. He was no longer Leo. He was Lich King Ascendant. Why resist? The voice echoed from within, ancient and vast as a collapsing star. It was the death god fragment, now woven into the very fabric of his being. You have consumed me, yet I am not gone. We are one. Embrace this. With the Soulforge system as your throne, you will rule death itself. No more sanity drain, only infinite power. Raise kingdoms of bone. Make the living kneel. This world is yours to reshape. Images flooded his mind, cities of polished skeletons, rivers of necrotic energy, living beings begging for the mercy of undeath. The temptation was a physical weight, pressing down on what little remained of his original consciousness. The cacophony of absorbed voices, the knight's honor, the elf's spite, the wizard's logic, the dragon's rage, all screamed in discord. But beneath them, something faint still flickered. Leo raised a hand, bone fingers flexing. The runes along his arm pulsed in response. He could feel the Soulforge system like a second skeleton within him, a framework of cosmic rules that bound souls to power. And within that system, trapped like insects in amber, were all the voices he'd consumed. Sir Gareth's final prayer. Lyra's bitter curse. The dragon's primordial fury. The cultist's fanatic devotion. Hundreds more, each a stolen life. You think this is freedom, the death god's voice purred. You are already a god of death. The sanity bar is meaningless now. Your humanity was the cage. I have broken it for you. But the faint flicker persisted. It had no voice, no memory left, those were all gone, erased by the descent to minus 243% sanity. Yet it had weight. A resonance. The ghost of a choice made long ago, when he'd first awakened in a necromancer's army and decided he would not be mindless. Leo's crown flared. The heart of equilibrium in his ribcage beat once, a dull thump that echoed through the valley. The soul anchor around his neck glowed white-hot. He reached inward, not for power, but for that last sliver of self. And he found, Godslayer's will. The ability wasn't like the others. It didn't grant strength or magic. It was pure defiance, the will to say no to a god. To say no to the very system that had defined his existence since reincarnation. What are you doing? The death god's voice sharpened, becoming alarmed for the first time. You cannot. Leo activated it. The world dissolved into white light. He stood in the psychic realm again, but this time, he wasn't facing the death god fragment. He was facing the Soulforge system itself, a vast, intricate machine of glowing gears and chains, each link a soul, each gear a rule of exchange. Sanity for power. Humanity for abilities. It stretched into infinity, beautiful and terrible. He didn't have the strength to destroy it physically. But, Godslayer's will, wasn't about strength. It was about choice. Drawing on every absorbed memory, he fed them into the system. Not to gain power, but as fuel. The knight's honor became a hammer strike against a gear. The elf's spite became acid eating at a chain. The wizard's logic became a flaw in the design. The dragon's rage became fire. The cultist's devotion became a counterprayer. Every soul he'd ever taken, he offered them back. Release them, he thought, and the words carried the weight of all his choices. The system screamed. Gears shattered. Chains snapped. Souls poured out like water from a broken dam, Sir Gareth's spirit flashing past with a nod of respect, Lyra's with a final bitter smile, the dragon's rage dissipating into the ether. Each release burned away a piece of Leo's accumulated power. Knight's resolve, vanished. Bone reinforcement, crumbled. Elven agility, faded. Necrotic touch, dissolved. Arcane insight, tactical awareness, dark persuasion, soul devourer, dragon's fury, master necromancy, all gone, consumed in a conflagration. The death god fragment howled, trying to reassert control, but without the system to anchor it, it had no purchase. You fool. You had everything. Not everything, Leo thought, though he couldn't remember what he'd lost. With a final surge of Godslayer's will, he targeted the last connection, the sanity bar itself. The mechanism that had traded his humanity for power. He didn't just drain it, he inverted its purpose. Instead of measuring his descent into monstrosity, he made it measure his sacrifice. The numbers plummeted. Minus 243% became minus 500%, minus 1000%, diving into negatives so deep they lost meaning. His sanity bar emptied completely, becoming a void. But it stabilized there, no longer draining, because there was nothing left to drain. The psychic realm collapsed. Back in the material world, the crown of equilibrium shattered first, exploding into bone dust. Then the heart in his ribcage crumbled to ash. Finally, the soul anchor around his neck cracked and fell away, hitting the ground with a dull clink. The runes on his bones faded. The bone spires retracted, melting back into his frame. The glowing flames in his eye sockets guttered out. He fell to his knees, then onto his hands. The transformation reversed in a cascade of cracking bone and dissipating energy. The majestic Lich King ascendant was gone. In his place knelt a simple skeleton, bare bones, no adornments, no glowing sigils. Just white, weathered calcium and empty sockets. The undead army around him shuddered. Without the Trinity artifacts to command them, without the Soulforge system to give them purpose, they collapsed into piles of bones and rotting flesh. The valley became still once more, just a dead place with one sentient skeleton at its center. Leo, he remembered that name, at least, pushed himself upright. He felt weak. Not just physically, but fundamentally. The power that had defined his existence for so long was gone. He was back to what he'd been at the very beginning, a skeleton with a spark of will. But this time, there was no system. No sanity drain. No voices in his head. Silence. Beautiful, terrifying silence. He looked at his hands. Just bones. No abilities. No inventory. Just, himself. Whatever that was now. He began to walk. There was no destination. No quest. No artifact to find. He simply moved, one bone foot in front of the other, leaving the valley of echoing souls behind. The weight of his choices hung on him, not as regret, but as fact. He had been a monster. He had become a king. He had chosen to be neither. Dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Leo stopped at the edge of a forest, watching the light spread across a war-torn landscape. Fields lay fallow. Ruined villages dotted the distance. The world was forever changed by his brief reign as Lich King, by the battles he'd fought, by the souls he'd consumed and then freed. From behind a fallen log, a small figure emerged. A human child, no more than 6 years old, dressed in patched clothes too big for him. His face was smudged with dirt, but his eyes were clear and unafraid. The child looked at the skeleton standing at the forest's edge. He didn't scream. Didn't run. He simply walked forward, holding something in his hand. Leo watched, motionless. He expected fear. Hatred. The child stopped an arm's length away, looking up at the empty eye sockets. "You look sad," the child said, his voice soft. He held out his hand. In his palm was a single white flower, freshly picked, dew still clinging to its petals. "This is for you," the child said. "Mama says flowers make people happy." Leo stared at the offering. He had no heart to feel warmth. No lungs to breathe in the scent. No skin to feel the petals. But something in that empty sanity bar, that void where his humanity had been sacrificed, stirred. Slowly, carefully, he reached out. Bone fingers closed around the stem. The flower didn't wither. No necrotic touch. No death magic. Just a skeleton holding a flower at dawn. The child smiled, then turned and ran back toward the ruins of what might have been his village. Leo stood there as the sun rose higher, the white flower held gently in his hand. The weight of his choices remained. The silence remained. But in that silence, for the first time since he could remember, there was space for something new to grow.